Hey my watchers, welcome. Today we are gonna see, what if Harry Potter was Master of Time Turner? Join Patreon for early access exclusive content of Super Op stories. Also contents that's too far for YouTube. You will get 400 content there, please do check that too. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. Harry's POV. It's been a week since the war and I'm just dead. I feel so damn dead inside. All I want is to see my mother, father, Remus, Fred, and Sirius. They all died because of me. George lost a twin. Molly lost a son. Ron lost a brother. I lost a brother. Fred was like a brother to me. I was the only person who could tell them apart. And for that they loved me like a brother. They never pranked me once because they were so thankful somebody actually noticed. I just wish I wasn't such a naive child back then. All I was a pathetic, scrawny, naive child of about 5 foot tall. I know. Note the sarcasm. I mean, even now I'm only 5'8" when really I should be about 5'11". Both my parents were tall, but because of the fucking Dursleys I'm tiny. From malnourishment. I would occasionally get hit, but it wasn't every day. So I had an ugly body. I'm still very insecure about myself. I'm littered in scars, but I'm beginning to wear them like battle scars and be proud, but it's so hard. I just want to die and be with my family. Skip to nighttime, I've decided to do it. I'm letting go of my soul. I laid down in my bed and closed my eyes. And I let go. My last thought was hoping Ron and Hermione would be fine. Line break. When I opened my eyes it was blurry, so I rubbed any sleep out of my eyes and looked around. I expected to be at King's Cross, but again the Potter luck struck. Hello, young master. I've been waiting for you. I whipped my head around at such a speed I almost broke my neck. When I looked up at the man, well, he looked like a male, sort of. He was about 6'7" and had no eyes, a skull for a face and bony hands. The red of him was covered by a long black cloak, not unlike my own invisibility one. Oh, OHITS Death. Hello, Death. He looked surprised, if that's possible without eyes or any facial features really. Greeting me like an old friend. Are you? A loud rickety sound vibrates around the office-like room. It was Death's chuckle. I merely smiled, just like Ignotus did. He said. The third Peveril brother. Death nodded. So am I dead or not? Death shrugged. That was very, very strange to witness. Well, I may not be human, but I do have the characteristics, you know. He grumbled.
Stupid humans.
Yeah, sorry. I meekly apologized. Quite all right, young master. Young master. Yes, master, you're the master of death. To say I was shocked was an understatement. How? Again his chuckle filled the room. You had all 3 Hallows. Yes, I'm aware you snapped the wand and threw away the stone, but they still belong to you. Oh, and also, I fixed them anyway.
Uno splatter di impure disbelief.
Skip. After a long explanation that I don't care to write, you've probably read a story similar. But Dumbledore is good in mine, although I do love the stories where he isn't. So now what? Now, young master, you have 3 choices. Number 1, you can go back to where you left off and have your extra powers. 2, you can go on into the afterlife, or 3, in my opinion the best one, to go back to when you were born and relive your life how you want. Of course you can't save your parents, but you can use your magic to scare the Dursleys so you will have a better upbringing, and I will even cure you awful eyesight, being the kind deity I am. The last sentence made me snort, and the arrogance in his voice. So I won't be that scrawny child with no idea about magic. No, young master, I shall even grant you a sliver of my magic. Worry not, it shan't do anything to me, but it will be of great significance to you. In fact, it will most likely double your magical core. And you will have some other gifts, as you know. Suddenly there was a bright golden flash, and there stood 7 figures. The other deities. Life, fate, chaos, mischief, beauty, intelligence, time. They introduced themselves one by one. My favorite was definitely Mischief. He was rather like me when I do pranks. Something I wanted to do growing up, just like the Marauders, but I never had time to do. Now I can. Each other then granted me something. From Life. Like Death, a sliver of her magic. My core now triple what it used to be. From Fate. A sort of seer ability. I don't make prophecies, but I can see bits of the future if I were to make certain choices. From Chaos. Wandless magic. He wanted me to be able to scare the Dursleys and cause chaos with the Death Eaters. From mischief, wordless magic so I could activate pranks easily and use wandless magic without saying it out loud. From beauty, basically made me a bloody Greek god, not that I wasn't thankful because now I might actually get a date easily to the Yule Bull. When I told her that, she just smirked and said, "You won't have any trouble, trust me." She said she hadn't even able to use her powers like that for ages, so she was very happy to make me good looking. From intelligence, an eidetic memory, so after I ready books I will remember it. Natural occlumency and legilimency, which is great. Now I don't need Snape. In fact, my barriers are stronger than his, and Voldemort won't be able to put visions in my mind. From time, well, he was bringing me back in time, so that was enough I thought, but nope, he gave me the ability of a metamorphmagus, which I have no idea how time of all people did, but here we are. And finally from death, he fixed my eyesight and gave a sliver of his magic. And all together they gave me the ability of an elemental. My core was absolutely huge. It was bigger than Merlin's. And also they said I should probably get an inheritance test done when I'm older in Gringotts, because I never did. They said I had a fair few lordships and airships. Finally it was time to go. Good luck, Harrison, they all said. Oh yeah, that was another thing. I asked if they could change my name because Harry was weak, Harrison wasn't. They said they would implant the idea into my father's head so he would do it. I was excited to be able to see the Marauders young and my parents and be able to remember it. I knew I would cherish that year forever. Thank you all so much, I said happily. They all smiled, and then time and death, but a special sort of time turner on me that would go back to them when I was reborn. Oh, and also they can talk in my head with me, so I'm never really alone. Chapter 2 Reborn. Harrison's POV. I was all nice and warm in a dark place, but then suddenly I became aware of screaming and then very bright lights. Well, it seems I'm being reborn again. I almost screamed. Almost. Is that you, life? Well, not exactly.
y said that.
Then suddenly I became aware of what was going on. My mother, Lily Marie Potter née Evans, has just given birth, and the nurses were making sure I was fine. Unlike most babies, I didn't feel the need to cry because technically I'm mentally 17. So instead I just cringed from the cold. Not a screamer, very unusual, commented a nearby nurse. He's okay though, isn't he? I heard a frantic voice say. I recognized it as my mother's voice instantly. Yes, Mrs. Potter, he's perfect in more ways than one. What do you mean, ma'am? A manly voice asked. I turned my head from the nurse that was holding me to the voice. I almost cried on the spot when I saw who it was. My father, James Fleamont Potter. He's not only in perfect health, probably the healthiest baby I've ever seen, but he is also absolutely adorable. No babies are normally cute when they've just been born, normally they're rather, well, covered in wrinkles from being in the womb and wailing. He's perfect. Cutest baby I've ever seen. The nurse holding me said. I read her name badge. It said Janet Parker. Seems I can still read. Yes, you kept all your previous abilities and new ones, came Death's voice. Anyways, according to this Janet, I'm perfect and adorable. Not like any other baby. Why's that? Lee, said Mischief. If I internally laughed. As they went out of my head and back to their jobs, I was passed over to my mother. She held me tightly against her chest, with my father standing in front of her. Lily's POV. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. He had my eyes and James' messy black hair, but it was a lot more tame. But still messy, but in a more stylish way. Even his eyes, though they were the same color, they were somehow even greener and brighter. Full of life, pure joy, and two other things. Mischief, definitely James' son, but the second one made me confused. His eyes were full of love. Absolute pure love. He was looking at us as if we were the Merlin and Morgana. But it still made my chest feel warm. James' POV. As I looked down at my newborn son, I knew I would never be able to love someone more. He was so perfect in every way. Thick, fluffy, messy black hair like mine, bright vivid green eyes like lily flowers. He had pink pouty lips like Lily, long thick eyelashes like both of us, small button nose like Lily, but his face was more like mine. Even as a newborn he had high cheekbones and a good jawline. He had naturally tan skin like me and thick, perfectly sculptured eyebrows again like mine. Honestly, he was like a little prince. Regal looking. He's gonna be a real charmer, I laughed. James, Lily scolded, but with a massive smile of her face. She was practically glowing, and I knew I was the same. Suddenly he made a cooing noise, and it was honestly the most adorable thing I'd ever heard. It was a noise I knew I would use if I had to produce a Patronus. My baby son's cooing. Hey Pronkslet, I'm your dada, I told him softly. Oh no. James, really Pronkslet? Lily questioned me incredulously. I just nodded, not taking my eyes off my baby son. Harrison's POV. Being in my parents' arms was the best feeling I'd ever felt. I loved them already, and I could tell they loved me already. They both looked at me as if I was their entire world. Because you are Harrison. This is how you should have been treated growing up, kid. Fate told me sadly. Really, of course. I snapped out of the conversation when my father said something. I'm gonna go get Padfoot, Mooney, and Wormtail.
Ok, James.
My mother smiled. Whilst my father left, my mother put my head in the crook of her neck and put her right hand on the back of my head as I couldn't yet support it, and her other hand on the back on my thighs. She began talking to me in a soft voice. You know, baby boy, your mama and dada love you so much already, and you're only 4 minutes old. I just want you to know that you and James are my entire world, and I'll do everything to protect you, okay darling? As I couldn't exactly talk, I just made a cooing noise. But it was enough for her as she looked down at me and smiled. Then I heard the door open rather loudly, startling me, causing my mother to glare at the 4 young men. Boys, you made him jump. You're lucky he didn't start crying, otherwise I'd skin all of you alive. Mentally, I was roaring in laughter. Go mama. The 4 young men winced, knowing what a newly mother could do, having been around Alice Longbottom yesterday, when Neville Franklin Longbottom was born. Slowly they all came towards me and my mother. Hey Lily. How are you doing? A young 20-year-old Remus asked. I'm tired and sore, but this little one makes up for it. That brought their attention to me. Pass him here, Lils. My father said. My mother looked very reluctant, which amused me. Fine, she sighed. My father scooped me up from my mother's grasp and cradled me like a baby. Well, I suppose I am one. Want to hold him, Padfoot? You are his godfather. You mean dogfather? A young Sirius exclaimed. He was so much happier and full of life with James. Oh no, you've set him off again, James. Remus sighed. Oops, was James' sheepish reply. So anyway, do you want to hold him? Yes, an excited Sirius said. I'm pretty sure if he had a tail it would be wagging right about now. Came Life's voice. I could hear chaos and mischief sniggering. Carefully my father laid me in Sirius' arms, and he held me with so much care I honestly couldn't believe it was the same person. He's so tiny. He whispered. Well, he'll grow, came my dad's voice. He was holding me with one arm because I was a pretty small baby weighing only 5 IBS and 5 ounces. Are you sure I'll be taller when I'm older, beauty? JF Intelligence, amused voice said. With his other hand he gently picked up my hand and caressed it carefully. I grasped one of his fingers tightly, as if to show how much I loved him even as a baby. It worked because he gained a shit-eating grin. How is it possible to love such a tiny human? You've only just met Jamie because he's the Marauder's son, was Dad's smart answer. The Marauder's son? My mother asked, amused. Yeah, when you marry one of us you marry all of us, Mrs. Prongs, Padfoot, Mooney, Wormtail, and when you give birth to one of our children you've technically given birth to all of ours, child. That just made Lily laugh her ass off. You guys are like a bunch of girls, she snorted. I made another cooing noise to show my agreement. This made my mum laugh even more, and she walked over to us and planted a kiss on my forehead. Agreeing with Mama, I see, baby, the other just grumbled. Peter, your turn, Sirius said. Should I scream blue murder when he holds me? Merlin, you sure have a pair of lungs. What, I've never held a baby. I don't know how, came his timid reply. Here, I'll show you. And with that Sirius plunked me down gently into Peter's arms and showed him where to put his arms. I looked at Peter's face and expected to see disgust or something along those lines, seeing as he sold us our. But instead his eyes held fear but also a spark of love. Why is he looking at me as if he cares? Because he does. Don't be absurd. I'm not. He may have sold you out, which he deserved to die for in my opinion, but he did still love the Marauders and Lily and you. He was just too scared. Too much of a coward. He wasn't a good guy. But he certainly wasn't the worst. If he honestly thought the light side would win he would have stayed, but he thought they wouldn't. I still hate him, and that's fine, young master. He destroyed your life by selling you and your parents out, but that doesn't mean he never liked you, because he did. Okay, I believe you. But don't forget he isn't a good person, he is a murderer. He killed Cedric in cold blood. But that doesn't mean you can't be civil, as he hasn't committed these acts as of yet. Okay, Death. Just call me Killian, young master.
Ok, Killian.
Hey, Mini Prongs. Peter meekly said. I decided to bop his nose to say hello, although all it did was make him jump and the others chuckle. Well, now to Uncle Mooney, James cheered. James, is that a good idea? James looked at Remus as if he'd grown another head. Well, of course, Moons. What if he's scared of me? What if my scars scare him? Remus frantically said. Merlin, I never realized how insecure he was. Oh, Remus, you drama queen, you fold your socks. Do forgive us if we're not trembling at the sight of you. James rolled his eyes, whilst Peter, Lily, and Sirius laughed. Remus just huffed and shakily held his arms out to Peter so he could put me in them. Peter smiled a small smile and walked over. Merlin Wormtail looked so different with his hair. I could hear the other howling in laughter in my head. Carefully Peter put me in Mooney's arms and sat down. Remus looked down at me and his eyes went amber. His wolf had dubbed me as his forever cub, it seemed. Well, his wolf thought of me as cub very quickly. Fio Merlin, did he ever hold me again after that? I wouldn't blame him if he didn't. I should try it, came Fate's worried voice. Nah, young master will be seen as a genius anyway with his magical core and control. Okay, Emma smile and laugh. As soon as his eyes went back to normal they widened. He knew his wolf took over, so to reassure him I gave a very cute, if I say so myself, laugh. Shocking everyone. Just how I wanted it. Remus POV. Oh, Merlin, my wolf came out. Mooney, now he's probably terrified. He'll get over it, human. I snapped out of it as a soft laugh filled the room. I looked up to see whose it was, but they all just looked shocked. Then I followed James' eyes down to the newborn baby boy in my arms. He was the one laughing. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. All I wanted was to hear it forever, and looking at their mesmerized faces I could tell they were thinking the same. Harrison's POV. After shocking them all by laughing, Remus didn't want to put me down, but at the same time they all wanted to hold me, so they all decided to conjure a rug to sit on the floor. Currently I was on the floor in the middle of the circle they'd formed around me, protectively making sure nobody stepped on me in the hospital room at St. Mungo's. They were all currently trying to think of a name for me. I already knew it would be Harrison, but I had a feeling my middle name would either change or I'd gain a second one. I like Charlie, my mother said. Now what about James Jr., Sirius suggested. We are not calling him James Jr., my mother exclaimed. I just started laughing, causing them all to stop and look down at me. Do you like that name, my mum asked. I made a cooing noise. Okay, well, how about that be your middle name? Is that okay, baby boy? It's just that daddy is called James and it will be confusing. She smiled. Husk, suddenly my hair went bright red. Ah, there's the metamorphmagus abilities. Now even I'm not sure what that noise that came out my mouth was. Whoa, our son is a metamorphmagus. They all smiled whilst I laughed. Ah, Lilyflower, our son is adorable, Dad said proudly. She began laughing at him. Then suddenly James turned and said, how about Harrison? They all looked at him and then me and said in sync, yes, Harrison's perfect. So Harrison James Potter, asked Sirius. Well, I was thinking we could give him 2 middle names. What do you guys think? Mum questioned them all. He's your son, Lils. Remus laughed. That made Mum and Dad frown. Doesn't mean you have no day, Rem. He's as good as your son as he is ours, Dad proclaimed. This made them all smile happily. How about Harrison James Denver Potter, said Sirius. Denver as in Green Valley, asked Remus. Yeah, I mean he has green eyes so it fits. I love it, thank you, Sirius, Mum said whilst hugging him with happy tears streaming down her face. Do you like it, Harrison? Dad asked me, smiling. Jushif. He must have taken it for a yes as he nodded. Then he picked me up very gently, placed a kiss on my forehead and walked over to the nurse to fill out my birth certificate. Birth certificate. Name, Harrison James Denver Potter. DOB, 317-1980-1159. I do the date DDMMYY. Weight, 5 IBS, 5-ounce hair, black eyes, green skin, tan. Father, James Fleamont Potter. Mother, Lily Marie Potter née Evans. Siblings, none. Godparents, Sirius Orion Black Remus John Lupin Alice Mary Longbottom née Pruitt not Pruitt. God siblings, Neville Franklin Longbottom. Creature inheritance, active at 16. Special abilities, metamorphmagus shadow walk. Telepathy can talk in your head natural accoutrements. Natural legilimens parcel tongue. Beast speak can speak to any animal ability to become multianimagi. Magical core. Gray he's not light or dark but can use both easily, also he will fight for the light as their leaders, not a psycho murderer. Core strength. Bigger than Merlin. What I imagine Harrison like, just smaller. Chapter 4 Godric's Hallow. Harrison's POV. Today was the day we go back home to Godric's Hallow. I was excited as I could finally be at home with my parents. My all-time dream. 3 hours later, we had all fled home. Me in Dad's arms. I'd never felt so loved and safe. Dad stepped out of the fireplace and into the living room. A nice to be home, isn't it, Lilyflower? Yes, James, it is, especially with our baby boy. Dad looked down at me and gently rocked me, causing me to get sleepy. Go to sleep, son, we'll be here when you wake up, baby. He soothed as if he knew why I was fighting sleep. He didn't, so anyway I obliged and snuggled into my dad's chest, falling asleep almost instantly. He was just so warm, although not as warm as Remus. When I woke up, true to my dad's words, I was still in his arms and he was talking on his two-way mirror to who sounded like Padfoot. So how's Prongs, JR? Ah, he's fine. A little bit clingy, but he's yet to cry, which is odd, but I'm thankful. Lucky you, I still remember from when I was younger when Regulus would cry non-stop. It used to annoy me so much my accidental magic silenced him, which was hilarious. That set my dad off laughing, which fully woke me up. But he didn't realize and continued talking. Yeah, I'm glad I had no siblings, I bet you are, grumbled Sirius. I was getting a little bit annoyed as I was hungry, but I didn't want to cry as it made me feel stupid. Remember, this poor boy grew up in an abusive home where if he cried he was told it showed weakness. He would only cry if it was really bad. I mean, he didn't even cry when Remus or Sirius died. You would have to be strong to not cry, but he didn't because he was told it was weak. So instead I wiggled in his grip as much as I could with my newborn limbs and made fussing noises. This caused Dad to immediately stop and put this mirror down and try and comfort me. Hey son, what's wrong, huh? Maybe he's hungry or needs a change. Serious voice flooded through the mirror. Yeah, maybe. Let me ask Mama to feed you, son. He's a baby, so it's breastfeeding, not bottle, although some newborns do go straight into formula. It's healthier for them to begin on breastfeeding. Lilyflower, can you come and feed Harrison? Yeah, sure, came Mama's voice. After about 3 minutes, Mum came in with a towel over her shoulder for when she burps wins me. Sheep. After a rather embarrassing feed, remember, he's mentally 17, I was full and tired, so Mum took me to my nursery. My nursery was Gryffindor themed, which I loved. Mum sat down on the chair and rocked me with her arms whilst singing a soft lullaby. It's safe to say I fell asleep quickly. Sorry for short chapter. B. Chapter 501 years old. Harrison's POV. Looking back at my first year within being reborn. It's been amazing, like when I said my first word at 3 months old. Let's just say they were very, very shocked. 3 months old is incredibly early to talk. 9 months ago, I was in my playpen on the floor playing with a stuffed stag, wolf, doe, dog and fawn. Then suddenly Padfoot and Mooney came through the flue, making me jump. I let out a hiccup indicating I was about to cry. And since I never cry, they knew I must have been really scared, so just before I began to cry, my mum scooped me off the floor and cooed at me. It's okay, baby, don't cry. Shoo. That's it, darling. It was only the flu, don't worry, Mama's here. And Dada, and Uncle Mooney, and Uncle Padfoot. As soon as Uncle Padfoot said that, I decided to say my first word. Pafu. I really hated having to dumb down my speech, but a 3-month-old speaking fluent English might freak them out. Well, speaking at all did. Mama was so shocked she almost dropped me. Merlin, did he just say his first word? Yes, Lils, he did, and it was my name. They all laughed at how happy Padfoot sounded and then decided to see if I could say anything else. What about Dada, son? Da. Yes, you can do it, son, Dada, I squealed. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. Then they tried Marauder, not expecting anything, but I decided to let my so-called genius show through, and said Marauders. Again, Sirius and Dad, being dramatic, began crying and gushing how smart I was and how they were going to teach me lots of pranks, much to Remus and Mum's displeasure. Then when I first crawled at 5 months, again rather early. 7 months ago, I was playing with Padfoot and Wormtail in their animagus forms. Then suddenly Padfoot walked over to Mooney, but I wanted to play still. So I again decided to be ridiculously advanced for a baby and crawled to him. Mum got this on a magic photo BTW. which is now in a photo album that they made when I was born. Oh my, James, how is he so advanced? Mum asked incredulously. Two have no idea, Lils. He's incredible and adorable, piped Sirius. Yeah. Both Remus and Peter agreed. Then there was my first steps at 7 months old. This like crawling was actually very hard as I had tiny limbs and they were weak. As I get older I definitely need to train even more, especially if I don't want to be scrawny. 5 months ago, this time it was only Dada and Mama here. Mama was playing catch with Dada whilst I was in Dada's free arm laughing my head off, which made them very happy. Then Dada put me down in my playpen, but again I wanted to carry on, so I used magic to unlock the pen I'd bring, having accidental magic since birth, where as soon as I was born I blew up a nearby plant pot. It was recorded as the earliest bout of magic ever recorded. Then I crawled out. They were both watching me intently, wondering what I was doing. That looked rather purposeful instead of accidental, don't you think, Lily Flower? Yeah, that's what I thought too. Why's he getting on his knees, Lily? I don't kn. She was cut off by me standing up and using the playpen for support. James, make sure he doesn't fall. I am going to get the camera. Dada ran over to me and knelt down, putting my hands on his shoulders while having me still stand. Then Mama ran back in with the magical camera ready for me to walk. Okay, come here, baby, my mother practically pleaded. I looked up and smiled a cute smile at her and nodded. She laughed at my antics and continued to cheer me on. Eventually I put my right foot forwards and began to walk. It was more of a toddle, but it was an amazing feat for a 7-month-old. I toddled over to her, Dada catching me if I slipped slightly and walking straight into her open arms and being praised and picked up. These memories would definitely help produce a Protronus, a corporeal one, easily. And then finally my first birthday. Today I've just woken up and I'm waiting for Mama and Dada to come and get me out of my cot. After about a minute of the baby monitor going off, Dada comes in with even Messier hair, glasses, slightly askew but a big grin on his face. Good morning, Pronkslet, he said joyfully. Mornin', Dada. I put my arms up, signaling to be picked up. He happily obliged. Guess whose first birthday it is, son? Mine, Dada, I shouted happily. A soft laughter joined in on Dad's deep, charming laugh. I whipped my head around to look at the source of the melodic sound, and it was Mum. Mum with her dazzling emerald eyes much like my own and fiery red waist-length hair. That's right, Harrison, she said. Now let's get you ready for your party then. Exactly how I'd imagine Harrison at 1 year old. His outfit, the beanie and dummy as well, pacifier if you're American. Who's my handsome boy? Mum cooed at me. Me, Mama, I replied contently. Her and Dad laughed at my antics and brought me downstairs to the kitchen for breakfast. Skip to when all the guests have arrived. There are so many people. Some I noticed sadly wouldn't be alive by the end of the year. Like Marlene McKinnon or Emmeline Vance. Mum's friends. Even Mum and Dad would be gone in 3 months. Gideon and Fabian died about 4 months after my birth. They were just like Fred and George. Speaking of the Weasleys, they were all here, Ginny having been born about 2 months after me on the October 3rd, 1980. Making her in the year below me in Hogwarts, but actually in reality only 2 months younger. You see, Ron was born on January 2nd. Yes, I know it's not canon, but I don't care, and Molly got pregnant after a month of Ron being born. She found out on the 17th of February and had Ginny a little bit early, but she was healthy still. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. FWED, George. 1. GIN. Nebel, Charlie. Bill. I knew all the Weasleys already, but I really like Bill and Charlie too. I still wasn't the greatest fan of Percy, and I knew I probably never would like him as much as the others. I like Ginny for now, but in the future she's a bit irritating until 5th year. All of them just laughed at my behavior. I was the joker of the group, but also the charmer. Mum always said I was the perfect mix of all of the Marauders except Peter. I didn't have an ounce of Peter in me, thankfully. I was confident and funny like Dad. A charmer and powerful like Sirius. The others are powerful too, but with his upbringing around dark magic he's a bit more smart and creative like Remus. And finally kind and caring like Mum. But unlike Mum, I was cold to those who don't. I made sure not to be kind to everyone, as it gets you in trouble if they double-cross you. We spent the entire day running around and flying in the broom. Padfoot got me. Eating, taking naps, dancing, singing and playing. I was definitely the fasted. Just like before. B. 1,380 words. Chapter 6 Halloween. Harrison POV. Today was that dreaded day. The 31st of October, 1981. Halloween. My least favorite day of the year. Everything seemed to go wrong on this day, and no matter the year, I mean my parents dying to a troll almost killing us. So when I woke up wrong, a nightmare of what was to come tonight, I for once cried. The third time I had ever cried. The first was when I broke my finger after tripping at 8 months. That hurt. Especially as a baby. I mean, if I was a teen, I probs would have barely felt it. I mean, I'd even built up a tolerance to the Cruciatus curse. And I could throw off the Imperius as if it were a fly. So when I cried within about 6 seconds, Mama and Dada were in the room. They both came straight over, and Dada lifted me up, sat down in the nearby chair, and cradled me close to his chest. With Mama right behind soothing me too. After being rocked by Dad's for a few minutes, Dada brought me away from his chest and onto his lap. "What's wrong, baby boy?" he asked worriedly. "Nightmare, Dada." "Sky," I told him with tears still streaming down my face. "Ah, baby, it's okay, it was just a dream, darling," came my mother's soft but worried voice. "Well, Mama and Dada don't like it when you're upset and crying, so tell us all about it, and then we can go and eat pancakes," Dada exclaimed. It was later on tonight, and there was a Scarwy man with no nose. He had wet eyes and a howlable laugh. He pointed his wand at Dada whilst me and Mama ran up the stairs, and a bright green white came out the end. Then Mama went to my nursery and put me in my cot and put things in front of the door, but it didn't work. It blew up and the no-nose man came. He did the same thing to Mama, the green light, and I was all alone. Then he did the same to me, I shakily told them, crying still. Throughout the story they'd both gone pale and were both shaking slightly. "Oh, my poor baby, it wasn't real, darling," Mama said through tears of her own, taking me from Dad and holding me. Sheep. After that rather eventful morning, I asked Dad to call Padfoot and Mooney on the mirror. I think he was still slightly shaken from my dream, so when saying goodbye it sounded very heartfelt. It was now nighttime. I knew it was exactly 2 minutes until the door was blown to pieces and I was clutching Mama and Dada, crying that he was coming. And, God, that sounds creepy. They were rather panicked, as I never cried, and they were quite honestly looking like they were getting ready to leave. I wish they would, but I knew they'd never make it. From what Death told me, the anti-apparition wards erected by Voldy had already gone up, along with blocking the flue and any portkeys. Honestly, it was rather terrifying knowing he would be here soon. "Boom! Lily, its him, take Harrison and run upstairs," Dada frantically said. He gave each of us a quick kiss but whispered to me, "I love you, Pronkslet, and I'm so sorry I won't get to raise you. I knew I should have trusted my gut and listened to my dream, but I didn't, and now we're all doomed. I promise I will hold him off as long as possible, but I know it will be in vain. I love you more than anyone else in the world, and I'm sorry. You're the best kid anyone could ask for." And with that, Mum scooped me up and ran up, but just before we reached the top of the stairs I heard the killing curse, and unlike my mum, who only heard the thud of my father's dead body hitting the floor, I saw him drop hopelessly onto the floor, with a look of horror frozen on his face. Mum ran into the nursery, and just like before she piled furniture in front of the door, but she knew, just like me, it would be in vain. High-pitched laughter filled the air as Mama picked me up and hugged me tightly as the door was blasted open. She put me back down in my cot and said, "Mama loves you, Harrison. Dada loves you. Be safe, baby. Be strong. I love you so much, my perfect baby boy." She turned around with a look of determination. After the spell hit me, like the first time, I didn't die. Even if I did, Death would have revived me. But after I woke up, I crawled out of my cot and over to my mother's cold, lifeless, dead body and hugged her tightly, silently promising to avenge her. And that's the end of this chapter. Chapter 7, The Aftermath. Harrison's POV. After about 6 minutes, I heard footsteps from downstairs. I knew it was Snivellus from his memories. In my story, he still doesn't like Snape. He's a lot more like James in this story, although not a bully, just a massive prankster. I mean, who would like the man who bullied you in all your lessons with him? And as I know from his memories, he stepped carelessly over my father's dead body with a sneer on his face. Probably glee too. As if the man hadn't just laid down his life to protect me. Then he came into the nursery and promptly fell against the wall, hugging my mother's dead body. It was pathetic. Honestly pathetic. And in this story he really doesn't like Snape, as you can tell. And again, as you can probably tell, neither do I. I mean, just because his father bullied him, he thought it was okay to then bully an 11-year-old boy and humiliate him, and then having the cheek to ask Harry to look at him before he dies to see Lily's eyes. They were his eyes too. I honestly believe Snape only cared for himself and nobody else except Lily. Everyone knows he didn't really care for Harry, it was just his obsessive and bordering perverted love for Lily Potter. Sorry about the rant, rolling on the floor laughing. Back to the story. After he finally manned up. Again, he's been through the war and he refuses to show weakness, so he believes others are weak too. Probably why. He was almost sorted into Slytherin. He had their mask down. Yes, so after he manned up, he wiped off his tears and turned towards me. I don't know why, but I was expecting him to at least try and comfort me, but want to know what he did. Instead, he fucking sneered at me. A baby who was innocent supposedly, and had done no wrongdoings to him, received a horrible sneer of the greasy git. After that, he apparated straight out, leaving me in the ruins. I waited for Hagrid to come. Actually, you're waiting for your godfather, young master. Yes, it was him who came first all those years ago. He didn't just rush off, leaving you to go after Peter. No. He tried to take you to his and Remus' house, but Hagrid stopped him. He would have taken after to, but Dumbledore gave his orders to Hagrid to take you. Bloody Dumbledore. Yes, I know, but please remember, young master, he didn't know how truly awful they were. Yes, he should have listened to Minerva, but he didn't. Do not blame him. Yes, Killian. Good. And with that, Killian left my head and got back to whatever he was doing. Due to my enhanced senses I got from the deities, I couldn't help but hear cautious footsteps and then an agonizing sob.
No, James, jamie pronsplease.
Padfoot. Every sob was like a knife to my heart. The poor 22-year-old man had just lost his all-but blood brother. Eventually, though, I heard him put my father's corpse down and walking up the rickety staircase. Then suddenly I realized my forehead was actually gushing with blood. The curse scar. I was beginning to feel light-headed and promptly passed out. Serious POV. After carefully placing my all-but blood brother's lifeless form on the ground, I made my way up the stairs. Lily, I called out. No answer. Deep down I knew she too was gone. But I didn't want to believe it, so I carried on down the hall and into the blasted-off doorway. I looked down on the floor and saw a pile of black robes. Voldemort's, I thought bitterly. Then next to them lay young Lily's body. Green eyes open but dead and glazed. There was no mistake. She was dead, just like James downstairs. They were gone and never coming back. I wouldn't see them again for most likely years to come. They'd left me. What about Pup? I looked in his cot, but he wasn't there. Oh no. Where is he? Please tell me he's fine. I frantically looked everywhere. Just as I was about to give up, I saw black hair poking out from underneath Lily's arms. P.U.P. I carefully but quickly pulled him up, praying to all deities he was alive. As I lifted him, I could see he was completely limp in my arms, with blood pooling out of the new lightning bolt scar that went from the right side of his forehead through his right eyebrow, making his eyebrow look as if it had a shaved part. Imagine the lightning bolt running through the eyebrow. What is it called, a notch or something? Gently I pressed my finger to the pulse point of his wrist. Thrump. Thrump. Oh, thank Merlin. I cast Renervate on him and he slowly came back round. Harrison, are you okay, baby boy? I asked frantically. He slowly nodded but pointed to his head and said, Hurts, Pafu. I smiled sadly and healed it, also casting a numbing charm. I walked back downstairs with him, carefully stepping over James and out the door. As we got out, I heard the pop of a port key and looked around wildly. Wand out, ready to attack anyone daring to even come near me. Holding Harrison protectively close, making sure no harm will come to him.
Sierues oer, ere.
Came a voice I knew well. Hagrid. Hagrid, what are you doing here? I can't be bothered to write the accent Hagrid has, so bear with. Came to get Harrison. Dumbledore told me the alarms around the wards were triggered and knew they wouldn't have stood a chance, as they wouldn't have been prepared. He knew Harrison was alive because of the trinkets in his office. What, but I'm his godfather, James, and Lily would have wanted me to look after him. Pleaded. Sorry, serious, Dumbledore's orders. He apologized. Okay. I have to pay a visit to Peter anyway. I'll be back soon, Harrison. I said as I gently passed him over, but not without him reaching back out to me and saying, No Pafu doot weave me. Sorry, puppy. Hagrid, you can take my bike. He nodded. And with that, I apparated away with a pop. Harrison's POV. I watched sadly as Padfoot left, knowing his fate wasn't pretty for the next 12 years. Maybe I could get him released in a few years. No, it would look too suspicious if you just went over to the Weasleys and stole their rat. In first year then. Again no. Sorry young master, you'll have to wait. There would be no way you would have been able to identify him as an animagus. Even with the eidetic memory. He has no special markings and you're not meant to know he has a finger cut off. Marauders map. You're not meant to be able to see the Marauders, only they can. The only reason you can is because Remus told you the spell to be able to see the four, if they were ever in the map. Okay then. After that conversation, Hagrid carefully put me in the blanket Sirius had given him and put me in this sling-type thing so he could drive the motorcycle easily. Well, fly it. Sheep. As we landed, this time I decided not to go to sleep and was still awake when we landed. Imagine the scene from the first book with Albus taking out the lights and then Hagrid, Minerva and him talking. Albus cast a sleeping charm on me and a warming one to make sure I slept peacefully and warm before putting down the letter and leaving. Obviously, I deflected the spell and pretended to sleep. I sent out my magic to detect if anyone was watching, but there was no one. So like any curious person, I opened the letter he left and read it. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm sorry to say I bring awful news. Petunia's sister Lily Potter and her husband James have been murdered. They were killed by an evil Dark Lord named Voldemort. This is their 1-year-old son Harrison James Denver Potter. He is very powerful and strong. I would like for you to look after him until he turns 17. You needn't worry about buying his school supplies for Hogwarts, as he too is magical. He is a very wealthy person and has a school vault to buy his things with. All I ask of you is to raise him as if he were your own and love him. Also please tell him of his heritage, as he is immensely important for the wizarding world. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Hogwarts Headmaster. I nodded, happy with the letter. It had one spell on it. A sticking charm, no compulsions, which I wish he would have done. Not to do bad things to me, but to love and care for me. But I know that it would interfere with the blood wards. Good luck, Harrison. I thought to myself bitterly. Chapter 8 Growing Up. Harrison's POV. I am now 10 years old. It's the 30th of July. Tomorrow I get my Hogwarts letter. Now we can't just skip 10 entire years, so let me give you a memory from each year I've been with the Dursleys. Age 1. The first day with the Dursleys. The door had opened at 6 a.m. It was Petunia coming out to collect the milk. She wasn't really looking, but then her hand came into contact with something fluffy. She looked down and imagined her surprise when she realized she was touching a baby boy's head. Quickly she whipped away her hand and scanned the area to make sure none of the neighbors were looking. She couldn't have them snooping and gossiping her. Oh no, that was what her extremely long neck was for. So hurriedly she brought the boy that she had to admit grudgingly was the most adorable baby she'd ever seen. And she knew instantly that it was her perfect baby sister's son. For he had her eyes and her dreaded husband's hair and face. She scowled. A freak. After reading the letter she passed it on to Vernon. Shakily, as if even reading about magic made her want to off herself. After her husband read it, he was purple in the face with pure rage written all over it. I will not house one of these freaky things. I just rolled my eyes and silenced him. Toonie turned around and screeched in her shrill tones. Freak, stop it now. I winced from the noise. It was at that moment that Killian made an appearance. Don't you ever call my young master a freak ever again, he sneered. Get out of my house now, I demand you leave at once. Killian looked furious. I just began to giggle manically. Shut up, boy, Vernon roared. Thud, thud was the noise Vernon's body made as he went to the floor. Killian had knocked him out in one punch. I didn't know you could look like a human too, Killian, I squealed. Then blushed when I realized how much of a little kid I sounded. His deep laugh filled the room. Of course I can, little one. Now I'm going to modify their memories so nobody except them knows what happened. Can't have anyone knowing what really happened. If anyone tries to filter through their memories, they will just see them take you in like last time, but this time they take better care of you, but not enough to the point of where it's a loving home. So you have a reason to hate them. They will call you Potter, not Freak, because that's just rude, and they won't make you do chores. If they try, just prank them mercilessly or scare them with magic, he said joyfully. I nodded in understanding. Age 2. I had just gotten out of my toddler bed and carefully held the banister and walked down the stairs. When I got to the bottom, Dudley came running down behind me, knocking me over. But just before I hit the floor, my magic reacted, pushing me back to my feet and sending a newly 3-year-old Dudley flying into the wall, breaking his arm and nose. Serves him right, I thought gleefully. He was wailing at the top of his lungs, causing Vernon to come storming in like the walrus he was. Potter, how dare you harm my son? I am going to beat the freakishness out of you, he spat. I kept in the childish whimper that threatened to come out and held the tears in. Instead I stood up, head held high in confidence, and said, "It was not me, Vernon. It was your insolent whale of a son." He tried to push me to the ground, so my magic reacted. An eye for an eye, I'll say. My voice oozed anger and I practically spat Vernon's name. He involuntarily shuddered in fright as he felt the temperature drop. "Now take your pathetic son to the hospital and leave me in peace," I ordered with a voice of authority that would put the Dark Lord to shame. He nodded and quickly grabbed his son and bolted out the front door. Age 6. Sorry, but I'm skipping some years. I was playing in the park in Surrey with a little girl. She seemed rather familiar. "What's your name?" "Mine's Harrison," I asked happily without a trace of fear. "It's Hermione," she timidly replied. "Lovely to meet you, Mione. If I may call you that." She nodded, blushing from embarrassment from her stutter whilst I was so confident. "You to Har Harrison." I smiled charmingly, causing her to smile right back. "You know, your smile is very lovely," she said, then promptly went as red as a tomato. "Sorry too, didn't mean to," she frantically apologized. I just chuckled, which made her eyes glisten in tears. "Oh no, Mione, I'm not laughing at that, I'm just laughing at how nervous you are. There's no need to be, honestly, I'm sorry for being so forward, but it's just the way I am." I smiled. "It's fine and thank you," she said sincerely, causing me to cock my head to the side, not unlike certain dog animagus. "For what?" "For being so friendly. No one's ever nice to me. They think I'm a nerdy bookworm." I raised my eyebrow at her. "And what does it matter if you're a bookworm? I mean, I don't happen to love books myself, but I understand the thirst for knowledge. You honestly shouldn't care what they say." "I certainly don't," she giggled at me. "You know, you're honestly the nicest person I've ever met." "Well, thank you, my fair lady," I smirked. She just threw her head back and laughed. A true, genuine laugh. One she hadn't done for years. But he didn't know that. "You're most welcome, fair sir," she played along. "Hermione, time to go," yelled a nearby woman. Her face dropped. "By Harrison." She looked like she was about to cry. I felt bad. "Don't worry, Mione. We'll see each other one day, give it about 5 years, okay?" I gently told her. She gave me a funny but curious look and then sighed. "Sure. Don't ever forget your charming messy-haired friend," I winked. She laughed again and then was dragged away by her mum, who was frantically saying about missing their appointment. It was Christmas Day and I decided to venture out to the magic world like I had been doing since I was 4, obviously making myself look older with my metamorphmagus abilities. I knew most shops were closed, but a few were open. I had short messy black hair, a brown sweater, black jeans, and a scarf on. His outfit. I was so happy not having to wear those ridiculous glasses. I merrily walked down the large alley, which was practically empty. I decided to look for my familiar. As I walked down further into Nocturne Alley, I went to the Fantastic Familiars shop. The bell rung as I entered. The man behind the counter gave a quick "Merry Christmas, kid," and went back to work. I let my magic out, searching through the rows of animals, and felt more than one bond. I felt 2. I walked towards the first one, and it was a midnight black owl with white specks on. Seemed I wouldn't be getting Hedwig. "Hello." I spoke to it telepathically. "Master, you've finally come to rescue me from this horrible place," the owl, now identified as a male, replied. I nodded. "Bite me so we can do the familiar bond." The owl gave a hoot of agreement and nipped my finger, causing a tattoo of an owl to go onto my arm. "Your name is now Cosmos." "My own is Harrison Potter." "Yes, master." I walked to where I felt the second pull and came across my second familiar, a black wolf cub. This time, using my beast speak ability, I talked to it. "Hello, little wolf cub. Are you my master?" The cub wagged its tail excitedly. "Yes, I am. My name is Harrison Potter." "Yes, master." I held out my arm for the cub to bite my arm. It was definitely a female. "Your name is Ebony." The cub let out a little howl of agreement. Cosmos, Ebony, Harrison's wolf tattoo, Harrison's owl tattoo, and now back to present time. Anyway, today I'm going to read the books I brought from Diagon Alley on prank spells. I do want to live up to my heritage after all. Make my father proud. I know deep down my mother would be proud of the pranks too, even if she didn't approve. Especially the ones on Snape. Why, you may ask? Simple, she would never forgive him for how he did will treat me. Sirius and Remus will find it hilarious. I have a feeling that I will be a lot closer to them this life. B. Chapter 9 Acceptance Letter. Harrison's POV. I looked down at the letter in my hands and grinned. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Mr. H.J.D. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. A list of need equipment can be found enclosed down below. A reply is needed by the 31st of July. Everyone knows the list, I am not writing it in. Finally, it's only been 10 years, although I've already got most of my things, I still had to get my robes and inheritance test done. Quickly I wrote a reply which I thought would make McGonagall smile and also warn her I'm a bit of a troublemaker. Lee, doesn't everyone, I replied with as much arrogance as one could possibly muster, causing chaos, Killian and mischief to snort. The letter read, Dear Minnie, I would love to attend the fine school that is Hogwarts. I will not be needing a guide as I already know where to access and find Diagon Alley, having been there many times. I'll see you in Gryffindor. Get ready for the best year yet, full of entertainment. Harrison Potter. I smirked. I'm definitely going to be giving her gray hairs. I sent the owl back with the letter. In McGonagall's office, Minerva's POV, I was both looking forward to and dreading this year. And that was because young Harrison Potter was to attend this year. I had just sent out his letter. Now I was pondering whether he would be like James or Lily. I shuddered thinking of another Marauder. I think he will be just like Lily. Nice and quiet. Oh, how wrong she was. Suddenly the owl that I sent to Mr. Potter came back. I wasn't really expecting a reply. Normally Muggleborns or Muggle-raised wizards don't really know how to reply, not knowing whether it's a joke or they have no idea how to deliver mail via owl. I took the letter from the owl's talons and opened it. At first glance I could see it was written by a quill and on parchment no less. That's odd. I doubt the Dursleys would have informed him about magic. It was also very neat, fancy, loopy cursive writing. It was honestly the neatest writing from a first year I'd ever seen. Even better than the purebloods. It was neither like James nor Lily's. James was small and messy. Lily's was large and in print. His was perfect, as if he'd been writing for years. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. He's just like James. I just hope he's not a bully, although I had a feeling he wasn't a bully. James did eventually grow up, but even I must admit some of the pranks he did go too far. But I was happy that Harrison didn't let the Muggles break his spirit. Rather like young Sirius. I knew he would be a Gryffindor, and by the sounds of it so did he. Sorry for small chapter. B. Chapter 10 Diagon Alley. Harrison's POV. I woke up and cast a wordless and wandless tempest. It read 5:30 as usual. I got up and did my daily exercise. Sit-ups, pull-ups on the bar I installed on my bedroom door, planks and running a lap in the park. Then when I got back I showered and got dressed into a black dress shirt with gold patterns on and a black jacket with similar trimmings on. Then black dress trousers and shoes. His outfit, just imagine his hair a little shorter. Over the years my body had grown very nicely and my face had features others would kill for. I had short, fluffy but messy black hair. Vivid green eyes full of mischief and life. Small button nose. Pink pouty plump lips.
Tan skin.
Perfectly sculptured eyebrows. Long thick eyelashes that framed my eyes. Very high sharp cheekbones. Very sharp prominent jawline. The sort of jawline that girls would say was sharp enough to cut glass. I was a healthy weight. I was about 10 inches above average height. An 11-year-old boy is normally from 4F10 to 5F2, so I'm just going to say 5 foot is average, yes, so I was 5 foot 10 inches pushing 11 inches. I was also very muscular, having a swimmer's build. I could definitely pass for about 14 or 15. How he looks, just imagine him more tanned. And obs, the eyes green. Cosmos was out flying, so brought Ebony out with me. She was now 2 and a half and fully grown. Ebony, come on Ebony coming Harrison. I grabbed hold of her soft black fur and apparat to Diagon Alley. I made sure nobody saw an 11-year-old do that and then moved on to Gringotts. As I entered I bowed to the goblins who bowed back, having gotten used to me bowing to them every time I visited. The first time I did it they had been so shocked from my respect. Well, hopefully this time I won't have to fly out on a dragon. I walked up to the teller and said, "Hello teller goblin, I wish to take an inheritance test." The goblin looked up surprised but then realized it was me. Of course, Lord Potter. I nodded my acknowledgement and followed him to Ironclaw's office. Ironclaw was my accounts manager. "May your gold overflow," I said in respect, "and may your enemies fall at your feet, Lord Potter." Ironclaw said in a scratchy voice, "Harrison." I told him. He nodded. "Harrison, so you want to take an inheritance test, yes?" he asked. "Yes, Ironclaw." "Very well, 7 drops of blood on this parchment." I willed a cut to appear in my palm and dropped 7 drops of my blood onto the parchment beneath my hand. The wordlessly sealed my cut. The test read, Harrison James Denver Potter. Father, James Potter. Deceased. Mother, Lily Potter. Deceased. Siblings, none. Godmother, Alice Longbottom. Deemed insane. Godfather, Sirius Black. Incarcerated. God. Siblings, Neville Longbottom. Magical core, gray. Core strength, 1000. Larger than Merlin's. Creature inheritance, Ice Dragon Vila hybrid. Not the sort that have blonde hair and make everyone drool, but it's more subtle as he is male. He does have an allure, but it only makes people more attracted to him instead of drooling, but with his natural good looks they will probably drool anyway. Active at 16. 100. Dominate. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Potter. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Peveril. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Gryffindor. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Slytherin. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Hufflepuff. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Ravenclaw. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Lufay. Lord to the most ancient and noble house of Emrys. Heir to the most ancient and noble house of Black. After getting over the shock and turned to an equally shocked goblin and said, "I understood the lordships of the houses of Potter, Peveril, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Slytherin and Black, but not the others. Pretend that Hufflepuff lordship came from his father just like the others except the ones not mentioned in Slytherin and Black. It would seem your mother was actually a pure-blooded witch from a long line of squibs. She must have been powerful enough to regain the family magic of the houses of Ravenclaw, Lufay and Emrys." Ironclaw said, "So I'm actually a pure-blood, thinking of the time Snivy called my mother a mudblood and Bellatrix called me a filthy half-blood. It would seem so." Sheep. I was now going to get my wand from Ollivander's when Death popped in and said, "That wand won't work for you anymore as your core has changed and enlarged so much. You will need a custom wand. I suggest going to Nocturne." I mentally nodded and then slipped down the alleyway to Nocturne. I came across a wand shop named Burton's Wand Shop Custom Made Wands. As I stepped in, I sensed him lurking in between a row of wands on my right. Why do all wand makers insist on creeping up on their customers? I grumbled irritably. "Sorry, Lord Potter." "Oh yes, and that's another thing. They just seem to know exactly who you are," I said sarcastically, causing him to see I was only playing and step out into the light. "How'd you know I was there?" he asked, honestly curious, as nobody had ever known where he was. "I sensed out your aura," I told him in a rather deadpan tone. "Right, well, let's make you a wand." Sheep. I left the shop with my brand new 13-inch wand with ebony and elderwood and phoenix feather and tears and basilisk tooth core. The phoenix feather tears cancel out the venom from the tooth, making it not a dark wand, not a light wands. Like me, it was good for both types of magic, not just one specifically. Although he said it would be slightly more suited to offense rather than defense and transfiguration and conjuring. Me and Ebony also picked up some treats for her and Cosmos, then headed to Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. And just like last time, Draco Malfoy was there. I internally smirked whilst keeping my pure-blood mask on. Well, even if I will be in Gryffindor doesn't mean I can't be a cold-hearted bastard to the Ponce. As I entered, Madame Malkin called me over. "Hello, I'll be with you in just a second, just go and stand on the stall next to Air Malfoy." Then she looked up and saw the lightning bolt on my forehead running from the top of my forehead through my eyebrow. "Oh Merlin, Lord Potter. I'm ever so sorry." I chuckled charmingly and said, "It's quite all right, ma'am." Then she looked at me and not my scar and blushed bright red. Probably the Greek god looks.
Beauty said excitedly.
Okay, Lord Potter, she said whilst trying to regain her composure. I gracefully walked over to Malfoy with an air of elegance. Just before I stepped onto the stool, he turned to me and stuck out his hand. Draco Lucius Malfoy, heir to the most ancient and noble house of Malfoy. He puffed out his chest proudly, looking rather like the albino peacock his family owns. Harrison James Denver Potter, lord to the most ancient and noble houses of Potter, Peveril, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, LeFay and Emrys. Heir to the most ancient and noble house of Black. I said in an arrogant voice whilst showing the rings to prove it. Feels so good to be superior to Malfoy. Now he can't go running to his father unless Lucius has the balls to go up against a lord to 7 houses and heir to the House of Black. The deities were chuckling in my head. Malfoy's eyes widened when I listed all the names. Then he said slight weary as he knew it was the truth from the rings. But how? My mother was actually a pureblood from a long line of squibs, therefore making me a pureblood. He nodded and then muttered, I've got to tell Father Potter's a pureblood, excuse me. Oh, nothing, right? I then looked down and noticed he was actually on the stool still while I was on the floor and I still stood taller than him. I would tower over him if he too had his feet on the floor. Young master, you will tower over all your yearmates and the second years and most of the thirds. Yeah, you're rather short. Or am I just rather tall? I mocked him, my voice laced in amusement and glee that I actually towered over him for once. His eyes narrowed. You are just abnormally tall for 11. How tall are you? 5'7", he said, asked indignantly. I cleared my throat. 5'10", thank you. How about you, shorty? He blushed, having gotten my height wrong, and then scowled at the nickname. I am not short, I've always been known as tall. I'll have you know I am 5'4". I smirked. Not exactly tall for me though. He scowled as I winked. Sheep. I had just gotten back from the shop and decided to shadow walk this time back home. Not forgetting Ebony. End of chapter. Next one will be the Hogwarts Express. B. Chapter 11, Hogwarts Express. Harrison's POV. I was so excited. Today I was finally going back home. To my true home, Hogwarts. Imagine all the pranks I can pull. Young master, calm down. You look like an excitable puppy. Killian informed me, amused. I didn't blush like I would have done in my previous life, I just rolled my eyes and laughed. You see, in this life I am way more confident. Way funnier, way smarter, probably more than Hermione, but that's because I've got an unfair advantage, not that I'll tell her that, and way happier. I've missed my parents and the Marauders, but I knew I'd see them all again one day. My parents in death and the 3 remaining Marauders in my first year. Although technically I'll be seeing Peter in my first year. Skip, brought to you by a drunk James Potter in his stag form. This is it. The moment I'd been waiting for many, many years. It was time to go through the wall off platform 9 and 34. But this time I won't need Mrs. Weasley's help. But I'll still make sure to be friends with them. I had shrunk all my things down to put them in my pocket. Let Cosmos fly ahead and had a glamour over Ebony that would wear off as soon as we entered the platform. I walked towards the wall, this time feeling no fear, only excitement. I closed my eyes to soak in the feeling of being back, and then I opened my eyes and saw the beautiful scarlet train that was the Hogwarts Express. I smiled. I'm almost home. G5, I heard intelligence tell me. I mentally thanked her, then pulled out of my mindscape. I walked to the train door and stepped on. I was going to look for Hermione first. Maybe she will remember her charming messy-haired friend. I thought hopefully. After a little while of searching, I finally caught sight of bushy hair entering a carriage. I almost bolted to her but managed to keep collected and slowly made my way towards her, but if you looked closely you would see a small bounce in my step. I knocked on the door, unlike her in the previous lifetime, and waited. Come in, her rather bossy voice said. I rolled my eyes. Classic Hermione. I walked in and said in a cheeky voice, "Miss me, babe." Her head snapped up with such a force I'm quite surprised her head didn't fall off. What, she screeched. I laughed my charming laugh and turned back to her.
I'm Harrison Potter.
Your charming messy-haired friend from 5 years ago. She gasped and then flung herself at me. Oh my God, and remember Muggleborn, she doesn't use Merlin yet. Harrison, I waited so long to see you again. she exclaimed. Same here, Mione. Same here. She looked at me and said, it really is you. I never knew your last name was Potter. Then suddenly she must have realized she was practically on my lap as she blushed bright red and quickly scampered off. I mock pouted and whined. Oh, why'd you get off? I was quite enjoying that. Her face became incredulous. Harrison, she swatted my arm. I just smiled goofily, causing her to giggle. Still with the lovely smile, I nodded. Good, wouldn't have it any other way. After a while, a small pudgy boy nervously knocked on the door. Neville. I smiled brightly and introduced myself, which in turn made his eyes go wide and then start introducing himself. I invited him to sit with us, and we were just about to begin a conversation when a freckled boy slowly slid open the door and asked if he could sit down as everywhere else was full. Just like last time. I noted. Of course I smiled and let him in. Then we got back to our conversation on the houses. So what house do you want to be in? Hermione asked. I wouldn't mind Hufflepuff, but my gran wants me to be in Gryffindor, which I also wouldn't mind. But I'm not brave enough. He muttered the last part, but we all still caught it. Nonsense, Neville, you will are brave and brilliant, not to mention skilled and smart. You will do fine in either house. I told him sternly. In return, he offered a thanks, which I waved off, telling him he was being ridiculous. What about you, Ron? Hermione questioned the ginger. Gryffindor for me, my whole family was in there. I don't want to be with the slimy snakes, he told us. Time to say something just like my father. I chaos. Sure is. Merlin, not Slytherin. If I were to be put into Slytherin, I think I'd go home. Wouldn't you? I grimaced at the thought. This sent them into fits of laughter, except Hermione, of course. You really shouldn't say things like that about them. I wouldn't mind being in Slytherin. Merlin, and I thought you were all right, I exclaimed. Once again saying something my father once said. But I couldn't help it. It just fit the argument so well. I could hear mischief and chaos roaring in laughter whilst life was sighing in exasperation. She merely sniffed but then said, all right, I suppose they are a bit rude. Although it was very reluctant. I snorted just a tad. Mione. He's right, Mione. Ron tried out the nickname. What none of us were expecting was Hermione to turn round, eyes blazing, and say, only Harrison is to call my Mione. I gave her a look as if to say, we are talking about this later. She nodded slightly. Okay, sorry. And with that we carried on until Hermione decided it was time to change into our robes. Sheep. It was time to get into the boats once more, so I got into one with Ron, Neville, and Hermione. Me being a gentleman. Yeah, right, and I am life. Death snorted. I mentally hugged and told him to do one, the sarcastic bastard. Anyway, me being the gentleman I am, helped him in and then back out when we reached the castle. Hagrid banged on the big heavy doors and waited for McGonagall to step out. McGonagall. The first years. I can see that, thank you, Rubius. She said with her lips in a straight tight line as always, making me chuckle quietly. Follow me to the Great Hall. And with that she swept around and walked in. Skip until after her speech about the house to just as the sorting is starting. Hannah, Abbott, Hufflepuff, Susan, Bones, Hufflepuff. I decided to tune out until Hermione's sorting. Hermione Granger. After about a minute the hat shouted, Gryffindor. I clapped and cheered. Probably the loudest of the looks I got meant anything, but I didn't care.
Yes, Mione, I am so proud.
I pretended to wipe tears from my eyes, causing the other students to snigger at my behavior and Hermione to go bright red. Shut it, Harrison, I merely smirked. Harrison Potter. I wiped my face clean off emotions, held my head high and gracefully walked forwards like the perfect pureblood heir. Mainly to throw them off, but also because it amused me to walk as if you had a rod up the back of your shirt. As I walked up I heard many things. The Harrison Potter. Merlin, he's so handsome. Whoa, how's he do, tall and hot. He looks like a fourth year. You can literally see the muscle through his robes. I smirked at the comments and sat down on the stall, but not after winking at Minnie and telling her I would see her in Gryffindor. She just rolled her eyes, but I could see her struggling to hold a smile in. Before it had even touched my head. Just like Malfoy, but even quicker, it practically roared, funnily enough. Gryffindor. The cheers were instantaneous. It was like thunder. As I walked down the aisle after giving the hat back, obviously, I could hear everyone saying how the hat sorted me so quickly. It must have been the quickest sorting of all time. Of course, like the first time the twins were chanting, we got Potter, we got Potter. I sat down in next to Hermione, who was sitting next to Neville, and opposite from me were the twins. and then an empty space I was saving for Ron. Hey Potter, I'm Fred, and he's George. No, aren't you George? And I'm Fred. Oh, maybe I'm Gred, and you're Forge. I smiled, eyes glinting in amusement at them, trying to throw me off. But I knew their differences in appearance, like how Fred's eyes were more bluish-green and how George's hair was darker. But also I could sense their different personal auras. Albeit they were very similar, there were still differences. Hello, George, Fred. I nodded at the twins respectively. They were so shocked it was unreal. Their eyes had widened comically and they were spluttering. You're the first ever person to get it right, Fred said. I nodded. I can see quite a few differences in the shade of eye and hair colors. They nodded in understanding and turned back to the sorting. Ronald Weasley. After about 10 seconds the hat boomed. Gryffindor and me and the twins flapped the loudest. Chapter 12 First Day. Harrison's POV. I walked with Ron, Neville and Hermione to the common room. Obviously I wasn't going to gasp at every little thing I saw. I mean, I've seen it loads of times. We finally got to the fat lady portrait who guards Gryffindor Tower, and the prefects told us the password. It was Leo, as in lion. When we walked into the room I couldn't keep the smile off. Finally I was home. Come on, let's go up and put away our trunks in the dorms, Neville suggested. We all nodded and headed upstairs. On the door was our nameplate. Neville.F. Longbottom Harrison J.D. Potter.
Ronald B. Weasley.
Seems like we are not with Seamus and Dean this time, FYF, said Mischief. I mentally smirked and thanked him. The other boys' dorm said Seamus, Dean, Benjamin and Oliver Rivers. Hermione's POV. I walked up the left staircase whilst the boys walked up the right. I walked along the hall of girl dormitories and finally at the end came to the one with my name on. The name plaque read, Lavender Brown Faye Dunbar Hermione Granger Parvati Patil. Harrison's POV. As we walked in it was a different layout to last time. This time it was set exactly like the Marauders dorm. Pretend Sirius and Remus showed him some memories off them all, with one bed in each corner. On the left there was one bed up against the far left window, one up against the closed left window and the same but on the right side. Layout, the beds. I picked the one at the far left so I could look out the window. Neville picked the one in front of mine on the closest left bed, whilst Ron took the one opposite mine on the far right. Why is there a spare bed? Ron asked. Because there's normally 4 or 5 to a dorm, but they've split us up a bit differently. Probably some people from last year mucked around a lot, so they lowered it to 3 or 4. Who knows? I replied. They seemed to accept this answer as the both nodded. Anyway, when we are planning pranks, Hermione could sneak up here and sleep on that bed. Pranks? Neville and Ron asked simultaneously. I nodded excitedly. We are going to wreak havoc on Hogwarts. They both grew mischievous glints in their eyes and big smiles. Seems Neville is already way more confident. Young master is because your confidence is catching, it would seem. Killian informed me, amused. Beauty sighed happily. All the others rolled their eyes and went back to their jobs. Let's get planning, I cheered. We ended up planning for hours and made lots of ideas. Our first one would be set up tomorrow. A word-activated prank on the Slytherins. We would charm their table, and every time the Slytherins said a certain word, in this case it was Gryffindor, they would all go different colors. Sheep. It was the morning and we were all getting ready. We had practiced the charms that I had taught them, and now we just had to go to breakfast and whilst eating secretly charm the table. I modified the spell so that it can't be taken off, only wears off after 6 p.m., which I thought was rather impressive if I do say so myself. Of course, when I told Killian this, he only snorted and said, sure. But Chaos and Mischief were happy, as was Life, for having more fun this time round. Anyway, we all got dressed into our Gryffindor robes, and went down to meet Hermione. She was waiting for us by the portrait hole when we got there. Morning, Mione, I said cheerfully. She just smiled and said, Morning, Harrison. So Harry W. He didn't get to see the rest of the sentence as I sent a rather powerful stinging hex at him. Ron complained. That hurt, don't call me Harry. Hate it, I glared. Whoa, sorry, I didn't know. I chuckled and said, it's fine. Only a warning. You are scary, mate. I glared playfully back at him, causing the tension to completely go. Right, well, make sure nobody calls Harrison Harry then. Okay, he told the rest of the room. They all looked confused, so Neville sighed and said, Unless you want his fiery temper set on you, I suggest you don't abbreviate his name like that. The room all nodded in understanding. Some shuddered, having had parents who went to school with Lily Potter nay Evans tell them about her temper, and not to anger her son as he may have it. On the way down to breakfast, me and the boys explained to Hermione what we were doing. Of course she tried, keyword tried, to talk us out of it, but once we had our sights set on something, there was nothing that could stop us. It seems we've made a second generation of Marauders. Harrison, James, Ronald, Sirius, Hermione, Remus, Neville, Peter. Although Neville already seems a lot more confident. Yes, it seemed Neville has become what Peter could have been. Smart and brave. Eventually. Anyway, so as the four of us took a seat, I could feel someone watching me, so I looked up at the teacher's table and saw it was Minnie and Dumbledore. I smirked to myself, and let the games begin. I started off the prank. Within seconds, the entirety of Slytherins sitting at the table had gone either red or gold. Well, it seems the Slytherins do like to chat about us Gryffindors. They talked about us so much they became us, I exclaimed loudly, much to the rest of the halls, excluding Slytherin's amusement. I was also standing on the table, much to the teacher's displeasure. Yes, it does, Harrison. Ron joined in. Although I do think we wear it better, don't we? I asked the others. Yes, I think we do, replied Hermione, much to my disbelief and surprise. Then Neville said, honestly, if you wanted to be in Gryffindor so bad, I'm sure you could have begged the hat. Then the teachers came over. An amused headmaster, a horrified Minnie, and a fuming Snape. Potter, Weasley, Longbottom, Granger. Snape roared. Yes, Professor, I said as innocently as possible. 20 points from Gryffindor. Severus, I do believe I am their head of house. I shall give out the suitable punishment. They are not in your class, so I shall do it. Mine told him sternly. Snape sneered but walked away. Dumbledore just chuckled and said, I do enjoy a good prank. We all smiled and I said, glad to give worthy entertainment, sir. The others three stared at me like I'd grown another head, but eventually Ron laughed alongside Dumbledore, who had now returned to his seat. You're brilliant, Harrison. Excuse me, Mr. Weasley, but I would like to cut in and tell you all no more pranks, otherwise it will be detention. Minnie said. I poured and then said, but Minnie, we can't live without pranks. I could see her lips twitch, and I knew it was from the similarity of me and the Marauders, especially with calling her Min. Mr. Potter, please refrain from calling me that name. Professor McGonagall will do, and here is your schedule. Okay, Minnie, thanks, I replied, and then ran after taking my schedule. My friends following closely behind. Minnie's POV. When the four of them stood on the table after the prank, I couldn't help but smile. There's even 4 of them. But then when I went over to tell them off and Harrison just replied with a cheeky okay, Minnie, I felt dread. Oh, and oh, not another one with they awful name. First James and Sirius, now Harrison and Ronald. This is going to be a long year. Harrison's POV. When we got back to the common room, we all fell over laughing so hard. Me and Ron literally had tears streaming down our face, we were laughing so hard. Oh, Merlin, Ron roared. That was hilarious, Neville laughed. I have to agree for once. Hermione giggled. But then she turned to me and cuffed the back of my head. You can't call her Minnie, though, it's Professor McGonagall. I just looked at her and simply said, Minnie, you've got to get used to it now because I'm not stopping. She merely snorted, then sighed. It's going to be a lot of work for me and Neville to keep you 2 out of trouble, isn't it? Well, actually, I think it's going to be you keeping the 3 of us out of trouble whilst causing trouble with us. She just laughed and nodded. Well, we should go to our first lesson, Transfiguration. Sheep. Let's just say me and Ron were a little late due to the fact I transfigured his robes bright orange and charmed his hair neon pink. He didn't know how to change it back, so I ran to the classroom, him running after me while shouting, Get back here, Harrison, James, Denver, Potter, change back my hair and robes. We got into the classroom and everyone was staring at us. Then they all burst into laughter at Rob's predicament. Then Minnie the Animagus turned back into her human form and came marching over. 5 points from Gryffindor. Potter, Weasley. Minnie, I thought I did a rather good job with the transfiguring, I complained. I wasn't expecting her to say anything, but suddenly she seemed to be holding in a laugh. Then suddenly she just blurted out, 10 points to Gryffindor, 5 for the excellent transfiguration and 5 for the perfect charms. I dare say Professor Flitwick will be impressed. He was rather impressed with your charms on the Slytherin table. Then she turned around and walked back to her chair, but not without saying, Next time I will turn you and Mr. Weasley into a pocket watch, that way one of you might be on time. I did my best mock offended face and then huffed and sat down pouting. Literally everyone had amusement glinting in their eyes. Why did she look like she was going to start laughing chaos? F-Fig-G. Okay thanks. Aha okay see ya. And with that he left my head. End of chapter. B. Chapter 13 Rest of first year. I'm skipping most of the first and second year as I want to introduce Remus, Sirius and Peter soon. I will do probably one chapter for year 2 and this is the last of for year 1. Harrison's POV. First year went practically the same except it was always me who did the spells first. It was me who figured Nicholas Flamel out and on the night the stone was to be taken I made sure to get down the door quickly. This time Neville also tagged along. The tasks went similarly to last time except I didn't panic on any of them. Then on the chessboard instead of playing I shadow walked them. I made sure to make them not tell anyone I could do that inside of Hogwarts as I wanted to use it to get away from teachers quickly. They agreed instantly as they too could just grab my shirt whilst I shadowed away so they could also get out of there. I then shadowed through to the chamber with the mirror and like last time Quirrell was there. But I made sure they were all expecting it by saying it was him who jinxed my broom not Snape. Yes I did get onto the Quidditch team but not for the same reason. This time Malfoy didn't get the remembrall as Neville never fell to the floor as I caught him. He is still a pretty nervous person but no way near as bad as he was. So instead Hooch recommended me to Minnie who allowed it. I caught the snitch in 3 minutes. A new record that I'm pretty sure nobody would beat. This time instead of me getting bound to the floor by Quirrell I deflected it and ended up shoot a bone-breaking hex at him. It broke his hand. He managed to tie up the other 3 so they were watching in horror as I battled Voldemort. He had asked to see me like last time. I think he was a bit shocked with my looks as this time I was even taller than Quirrell who was only 5'7". Voldemort himself was about 6 foot so imagine his surprise when I was almost as tall as him in his actual form. Also without glasses and very good looking if I dare say so. Yes I'm pretty arrogant but I'm making up for last time. So anyway back to Voldy. The scene played out with me going, "Hey Moldy Shorts long time no see." He sneered and said, "Harrison Potter. Look what you did to me, you see what I've become." I to the disbelief of my friends just started laughing my ass off. Honestly like I cared what he became. Quit it boy, that just furthered my amusement. Wow dramatic as always Voldy. Where's your nose did you run into the wrong platform barrier at King's Cross I taunted. My friends were in absolute shock. Well Ron was half laughing half pissing himself. Hermione was frozen in fear but also telling me to shut up and stop mocking him. Neville was shaking in fear not knowing what to do but also trying to get out of his bindings. Which I thought was commendable. How dare you Crucio, I just dodged it and it went flying into the wall. I then turned back to him and taunted him some more. Seems you've lost your touch. Being out of commission for 10 years does wonders for the world. I was only riling him up for entertainment purposes and because he'd ruined my life. He was getting increasingly angry and started firing off curses. Just what I wanted him to do. I wanted him to waste him magic and energy and be drained so he was easier to kill. I mean yes I could probably easily defeat him in a duel with death and life's magic but what fun is that? Crucio but this time it went flying towards Hermione. I knew what I had to do, so I stepped in front of the curse just as it was about to hit her and took it for her. I grit my teeth. I had built up a resistance from my previous life but they didn't mean I didn't feel it. Especially such a powerful one but I made sure to show no pain on my face and to walk as if nothing happened. Obviously I would have to take a potion to reverse the twitch you get from it, but there is no way I was going to show him I was in pain. I'd been in worse pain before. Life the first time under the curse in the graveyard. Instead I smiled and said, "Ah what a temper you've got there. Do you need to go sit in the corner and cool off?" "Enough." "Nope," I said popping the pea. He went to lunge for me but I punched him square in the jaw, with a little bit of magic power behind it causing him to fly back into the wall and crumple to the floor, out cold. "H. Harrison that hat was wicked," Ron exclaimed. I smiled and undid the robes wandlessly. Hermione gasped and said, "You can do wandless magic." "Yeah," I said rubbing the back of my neck. "Whoa that's impressive. I would ask you to teach me but I know it's not really something you can teach," she said sadly. I nodded. "Sorry. It's fine." Suddenly the soul of Voldemort left Quirrell body and came flying towards us. I pushed them all to the ground and just as I was about to duck he went right through me, trying to possess me. I used my abnormally strong occlumency shields to shove him out. I could feel his surprise in my head. Just then Dumbledore came round the corner and tried to catch him, but he got away. He saw Voldemort attempt to possess me and said, "Mr. Potter, you must be extraordinarily powerful to stay standing after a possession attempt. Well done for resisting it. Now I must take you all up to the infirmary." I nodded, knowing I needed to go even if I didn't want to. Anyway, Poppy is funny when she shoves even Dumbledore out the way. My entire body was twitching after being under the curse for 2 whole minutes. He could see that and turned to me and said, "My dear boy, did he use the Cruciatus curse?" I nodded. "Not for very long, sir, but enough." "Not for very long, mate. He put you under it for 2 entire minutes. Normally, when someone is under it, they just hold it for 3 seconds, and then take it off and start again. He didn't even take it off, yet you stayed standing, and still managed to punch him into a wall." The headmaster had gone quite pale during Ron's rant and hurried us up. Poppy came running out, having heard the shouting, and saw us all. She sent each of us over to a bed and did medical scans for any recent injuries or health issues. Dumbledore stayed to make sure it was nothing too awful. "Now, Harrison, I shall do you first." I shook my head and said, "Ladies first, ma'am."
Dumioni. I'm fine honestly.
She frowned, having seen my twitching, but didn't say anything else. I don't think she's realized why I'm twitching yet. FFFFF. I winced slightly, knowing that it's true. I wondered if I would be her favorite patient again this time. "Most likely, young master, you do seem to get hurt a fair few times a year." Killian snorted. "Whatever. Okay, Miss Granger, I'm just going to wave my wand over you and any injuries will appear on this parchment." Hermione nodded her consent.
J. Hermione Jean Granger.
Age 11. Injuries. Fractured finger. Cuts on wrist and ankles from tight ropes. Poppy seemed not too worried and quickly fixed her. "You will stay the night, as it is already 11 p.m., as will all of you, even if you have no injuries. You will be discharged tomorrow, Miss Granger." She nodded in understanding. "Now, Mr. Longbottom." Neville Franklin Longbottom. Age 11. Injuries. Cuts on wrists and ankles from tight ropes. Small cut on stomach from Devil's Snare. Small cut on lip from fallen debris. Once more Poppy didn't look too worried, and healed him quickly, leaving a slight mark on his lip where it had been split. He too would be discharged tomorrow. "You next, Mr. Weasley." Ronald Bilius Weasley. Age 11. Injuries. Cuts in wrists and ankles from tight ropes. Large gash on shoulder from fallen debris. Mild concussion from a fall. Poppy looked slightly worried about the concussion and gash, but quickly healed the cut and told him he would be here for about 3 days because of the concussion. "Aw, but I'm fine," he protested. She gave him a sharp glare and he shut up. "Now, Mr. Potter." Harrison James Denver Potter. Age 11. Injuries. Large gash on right calf lower leg from Devil's Snare. Mild concussion from fallen debris. Failed possession attempt. Will be feeling weak and ill. Held under Cruciatus curse for 2 minutes without break. Need potion to reverse the twitch effect. For broken ribs from explosion. When they shadow walked the chess pieces, still tried to kill them, but Hermione exploded them, forgetting they would be hit. Harrison took the brunt of it whilst the others got cuts from debris. Poppy eyes widened at the Cruciatus and broken bones. "Mr. Potter, you said you were fine." "You most certainly aren't." Sorry," he said whilst rubbing his neck. "You will be here for a week at minimum. You're just like those Marauders, always in here." They were. I just laughed, but winced slightly from the broken ribs pushing against my lung. "No, don't laugh. A, it's not funny, and B, you could puncture your lung, which would cause you to drown in your own blood. Let's just say we were in there for a while. And as you know, we ended up with the most points for services to the school, winning not only the Quidditch Cup but the House Cup too." B. Chapter 14. Second year. Harrison's POV. This time I didn't end up with bars in my windows, as the Dursleys were still scared out of their wits from Killian. Life and Fate had also made an appearance over the years. They gave them a right talking to. I shuddered even thinking about it. Please, people, never ever piss off a mother. Life and Fate practically adopted me as their surrogate son. It was odd, but it was my family. Life adopted Mum. Fate adopted second mum Killian, adopted Dad Beauty, adopted Aunt Intelligence, adopted Aunt Chaos, adopted Brother Mischief, adopted Brother Time, adopted Uncle. Although I never see Time anymore. He is far too busy. I don't see Life often either, or Beauty, as no offense to her, but I have no need of her anymore. She already made me really fucking handsome. She said she would be visiting soon, adjusting some features. Knowing her, she would probably try and make me the most perfect-looking person alive. The girls and boys practically drooled over me, but being 12, I couldn't exactly hook up with him. Remember, he's now mentally 29, as he was 17 when he left and is now 12. I knew third year would be the year where beauty would really begin the adjustments, as that was a normal age for puberty. Last life I had hit it at 13, but this life I had hit it around the end of last year. My voice hadn't quite broken yet, much to Killian's endless amusement. Anyway, so back to second year. Sheep. I ended up still going to the Weasleys, but this time it was Fred, George, Ron, and their father picking me up with their car, which they drove until we were out of sight and then flew. Ginny, like last time, blushed bright red, but somehow managed to go even redder this time. Probably my ever-so-dashing looks. You're becoming vain, young master. Death thought it would be a good idea to inform me. Let's just say I became the first person except life and fate to scare Death to death. I played a bit of Quidditch with the boys and Ginny. I made sure to flirt with her, making her go bright red only for my pure entertainment. Of course that was a bit mean, but did I care? Nope, and anyway her brothers knew I was only playing around. I realized I was a lot closer to the twins this time round than last time. I knew it was my prankster nature. But Ron, Neville and Hermione were big on pranking too. We really were exactly like the Marauders bar Peter. Neville was completely confident now, and even Hermione had loosened up a bit and did some of her own pranks. She never did it to the same person repeatedly, unlike me and the boys did to Draco and Snape. I had grown to 5'10.5", so not lots, but still that definitely didn't matter, as I still towered over everyone from the lower year, my year, and the third and most of the fourth years. Even some of the fifth years. Of course you had quite a few shorties in all the years, so obviously I was taller than a few seventh years. Line break. Anyway, when I flood this time, I went first, as I actually knew how to do it now, and better yet, it was very graceful. I landed softly in the leaky cauldron and stepped out of the fireplace, offering a charming smile to Tom and a young witch of about 16 who blushed bright red. When we got to the bookstore, like last time, Gilderoy was there, but when he went to grab me, I shoved him off and gave the books to Ginny. The Daily Prophet had already taken my photo numerous amounts of times over the past 2 years. The first one to this day was my favorite. After the fiasco in Diagon Alley with Draco. Harrison Potter, the boy who lived a pureblood, and a handsome one at that, by Rita Skeeter. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, Harrison Potter is actually a pure-blooded wizard. It turns out the late Lily Potter was from a long line of squibs from the thought-to-be-dead lines of Emrys, Ravenclaw, and Leafy. So this means Harrison, a young pure-blood lord who has been said to be incredibly handsome or a Greek god by many witnesses, is actually Lord Potter, Peveril, Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, Emrys, Leafy. Let's get back to appearances. Today he was in Madame Malkin's collecting his robes when he happened to meet pure-blood heir Malfoy. Malfoy, who is said to be a tall, handsome boy with the grayest eyes and blondest hair, was apparently put to shame by the 11-year-old Lord Potter, Harrison. It came out that Draco Malfoy was 5'4". Still tall for an 11-year-old, but to which the young lord replied, "Well, it's not tall for me." It turns out Harrison Potter is not only incredibly handsome but also extremely tall and muscular. He stands at a towering 5'10" and will only continue growing. According to eyewitnesses, he was absolutely ripped. To quote a young Muggleborn, "It seems we have a powerful but absolutely gorgeous and charming lord in our midst."
Rito Shkito.
I smiled at the memory. It was honestly such a boost to the ego, which I never received in the last life. Anyway, moving on. When Ginny and me got practically interrogated by Lucius, the most intimidating coward I'd ever met. Honestly, he was as me and Ron loved to call Malfoy Jr., a blonde ponce. I made a right mockery of him, making comments about the previous year's article and asking him if his son had grown. But anyway, when he threw the book in, I made sure to skip it out when nobody was looking. I took it to Dumbledore at the start of the year and telling him it was a Horcrux. He visibly paled. If I recall it correctly, he also almost collapsed. When he asked me how I knew such a term, I sprouted some lie about when I took my inheritance test it listed me having a Horcrux in my head, which technically is not a lie, it did list it. Well, it would have done had Killian not removed it. And then he asked me how I destroyed it, and I told him the goblins had done it just like the one in my head. Obviously, I couldn't let him try and kill me off by Riddle's hands this time. I know he meant well last time, but oh how I wished he hadn't. Anyway, the rest of the year was pretty normal. The dueling club still went ahead again, with Lockhart being blown back by Snape, who then insisted me and Malfoy fuel. Snape, I noticed this time, was actually the one to tell Malfoy to conjure the snake. Well, I didn't give him the chance, as I had decked him within 3 seconds, knocking him out cold. Everyone in all the other houses had roared with applause, even a few Slytherins politely applauded. Snape for once didn't actually try and get me in trouble. Instead, he merely nodded in acceptance when the duel was over, but glared at Draco's still form. After that, I dueled Ron, who again I easily disarmed. Then Blaise Zabini, who I noted was actually quite nice when he was younger. It was a fair duel, which ended with me disarming him. He actually gave a small smile and complimented me on my dueling skills. I went through the entirety of the hall, but nobody could beat me. Snape then had an idea, but I honestly think it was for everyone's amusement, as he knew I'd win. For me to duel Gilderoy. He quickly agreed, thinking he could beat me, but just like Malfoy, he was out cold within seconds. Honestly, Snape seemed rather impressed, but he would deny it to his dying breath. The rest of the year flew by, with loads of people from all years commending me on being the top duelist of my year. Even a few of the older students asked me for a mock duel just for fun, which again, to their surprise, I floored them all. Even 2 7th years. They had all been good sports except one 6th year named Ryan Fields made up, who was literally frothing at the mouth. His friends soon shut him up though, and Fields came back a few days later and apologized and complimented my skills. It's safe to say my ego got a lot of praising that year. I made friends with the basilisk too, as I was immune to the glare from my immortality. Her name is Isla. She was Salazar's personal familiar. She was actually rather snarky. I told her all about Moldy Shorts, and she said she didn't regret killing Myrtle as it was in her nature, but she did regret listening to Riddle, as she had now learnt of what he eventually went on to become. I used the chamber for dark and light arts practice, and all other aspects. There were quite a lot of books down there on parcel magic that I never noticed last time. Then eventually it was end-of-year exams, which I got all O's on. I was the top of the year. Hermione has poured quite a bit after that and promised me she'd beat me next year. I just chuckled knowingly that she had no chance. Although I did commend her in coming second, which she was immensely proud of, as were her parents. We did loads of pranks through the year, like charming Lockhart's entire office bright pink and his hair black, which didn't suit him at all. Made Snape's robes Gryffindor red with golden lions on. Eventually it was the end of the year, and I went back to the Dursleys happily, knowing I would see Remus and Sirius after 12 years without them. I knew I would see Sirius sooner, as he was near the park when I ran away last time. End of chapter. B. Chapter 15, Summer to 3rd year. Harrison's POV. Well, it turned out I was right about beauty adjusting my features once I hit 13. My jaw was now even sharper, cheekbones even higher, and my voice had finally broken. It was now a smooth, deep, charming voice. Just like my now deep laugh. I now looked like this. It was the day that Marge was coming round. I already got permission to go to Hogsmeade, as Killian scared them into it. I noticed it was also the day I saw Padfoot in his dog form. Skip to when Marge Dursley comes. She came thundering through the door, not unlike her darling brother Vernon. This time I would not blow her up, but I wouldn't let the comments slide. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. If you would refrain from talking about them, it would be most appreciated. She merely smirked and said haughtily, "And what'll you do about it, boy? You're just a pathetic little runt, aren't you, just like your drunken father and mother?" She was soon cut off when she met my cold glare, eyes blazing and barely held in anger. She soon shut up, especially when I told her, "I suggest you don't talk about them unless you want to find out how much of a pathetic little runt, as you put it, I can be," I said in the sharpest, iciest tones I could muster. Honestly, I could feel all 7 deities shiver from the pure coldness in my voice. It put Walburga Black's glare and coldness to shame. She merely nodded slightly and looked away, uncomfortable under the scrutiny of my glare. Eventually I went and got my things and told them I was leaving. Vernon seemed like he was about to stop me when I used my magic to lower the room temperature drastically in warning. Ice actually appeared on the window with how cold it was. He left me alone after that. Instead of lugging a massive trunk around, I shrunk it down with Cosmos Cage and walked out with Ebony. "Stupid people," I said to Ebony. "I know, Harrison. You should have let me eat them," she replied, as if it was a casual request. Although the amount of times I'd mentioned how I'd love for her to go through on that idea, I was hardly surprised anymore. I sat down under the same street light as before, fixing it wandlessly whilst partying ebony. After about a minute I sensed Padfoot's aura. I internally smiled in joy. As I heard the twig snap just as last time, I looked up, but this time not with eyes full of fear. This time my eyes were filled with mischief and curiosity. Obviously the curiosity was feigned, but oh well. The mischief, according to everyone else, never seemed to leave my eyes. Rather like Dad. My eyes were met with a very similar sight of a huge black grim-like dog with starting silvery gray eyes. I smiled at him, but you could just take it from me liking dogs like he probably did. Instead of accidentally calling the night us, I merely turned to Ebony and said we should get going, girl. She howled in agreement and trotted after me. Once out of Padfoot's sight, I apparated to the leaky cauldron and rented a room out. Sheep, like last time I met with the Weasleys and Hermione. Arthur pulled me aside, but this time I told him I knew exactly who Sirius Black was and that I wouldn't go looking for him. Technically it wasn't a lie. I won't go looking for him. He comes looking for Peter, who's near me, so I merely follow him. Anyway, like last time, the only compartment free was the one with Remus in. When I saw him, I couldn't help but smile at his sleeping form. Do you know him? Harrison Neville asked me with his eyebrow raised. I turned back and nodded. He was one of my father's best friends. You know the Marauders? At the name they all nodded, and then we sat down and talked. This time I didn't tell them about Sirius coming after me in the most dramatic way possible. I merely stated he was supposedly trying to find me, and that they shouldn't be worried as I was a competent wizard and that they couldn't argue with seeing me single-handedly taking down 4 Slytherin 5th, now 6th years in a mock duel in my 2nd year. This time, when the Dementor came, I used my occlumency shields to block it out. You can't block the memories completely, but I'd managed to build up a resistance to them, after being around them so many times previously. I could have just used the language of the dead that Killian taught me, but I thought it would creep the others out, so I merely did a wordless Patronus, repelling it out the train. Remus woke up just as I sat back down calmly. He saw the end of the spell, so he knew I knew how to cast a Patronus. Are you all alright? He asked worriedly. Yes, Professor Lupin, the other 3 said. He looked at them weirdly, wondering how they knew his name, and my deep charming chuckle ran through the compartment, causing their attention to snap back to me. I stood up to my full height of 5 foot and 10.5 inches, which was still smaller than Remus, but nowhere near as much as last time. Remus was 6 foot 2 inches. Sirius was also tall, but not as tall, standing at 6 foot. Suitcase, sir, I said, pointing to the name. His face morphed from to confusion into realization. I had forgotten about that, he said sheepishly. We all laughed. I'm Hermione Granger, 3rd year. Nice to meet you. You to Miss Granger. He turned to Ronald. And you, Ronald Weasley, 3rd year. Nice to meet you, sir. You to Mr. Weasley. I knew your parents from years ago, you know. He told Ron, who nodded. I think Mum may have mentioned you before. Something about a phoenix, I don't know. He nodded, then turned to Neville. I could recognize you anywhere. I was good friends with your mother and father. You look a lot like them. He told Neville, who smiled sadly. Thanks, sir, nice to meet you. I also remember my gran talking about you and phoenixes. Couldn't help it. I snorted. I think she was talking about the Order of the Phoenix Mate. I smiled cheekily at him. I turned to Remus and said, Harrison Potter, sir. Although considering the circumstances, I'm sure you already knew that. I rolled my eyes, causing the others to chuckle at me whilst he was sporting a small smile. Indeed, Mr. Potter. I made a face of disgust. Oh, Merlin, no, you sound like good old McGonagall. He laughed. You sound just like your father, you know. Same nickname for poor Minerva and all. I grinned. You look like him quite a bit, with Lily's eyes of course, but you've definitely got quite a few differences. I nodded. Well, it was nice to meet you all, but I must go and have a word with the driver. We all nodded. End of chapter. B. Chapter 16, beginning of 3rd year. Harrison's POV. When we all sat down, Dumbledore did his Star of Year speech welcoming the First Ties, but then went on to talk about how the Dementors were not friendly and to not give them a reason to attack you. Then finally he introduced Moony. This is your new defense against the dark arts teacher, Remus Lupin. He did a small, rather awkward bow like last time. Good luck, Professor Dumbledore said cheerfully. Sheep. Me, the boys and Hermione were in our dorm, After sneaking Hermione up there, we're planning our pranks. We had to do our annual first breakfast of the year prank. What about if we let fireworks go off in the hall, I suggested. Oh Merlin, that's great, Harrison. Neville cheered. Hermione nodded and then added, also we should put a special time of glue on the floor near the Slytherin table so it activates every now and then. They'd get stuck in weird places and odd times. It would be hilarious. We all agreed instantly, and laughed evilly. Well, I should probably get back to my dorm, Hermione said. Nonsense, sleep on the spare bed, Mione, I told her. Are you sure? Won't we get caught? We've never been caught before and the girls will cover for you like always. I told her, completely not worried. Okay then, night boys. Night, we all said. Sheep. The next morning was great. Before anyone got to the hall, we snuck down using my invisibility cloak and poured glue all over the floor where the Slytherin's table was. Then put fireworks all around the room that would activate when I said fireworks show. We snuck back up to the common room and warned them all. Every single one found it hilarious, even the really academical ones. Then us four walked casually down to the Great Hall and took a seat. All the teachers were there, and so were the Slytherins. It was time to start the prank. People already looked wearily, wondering where the prank was, as we always did one at the first breakfast. I looked at the other three and they nodded. Do it, Harrison. Fireworks show. And all hell broke loose. Remus POV. As I watched Harrison and his friends sit down, it reminded me of my school years. There were 4 of us and 4 of them. James was like our leader, Harrison was theirs. James and Sirius were basically brothers, and it seemed Harrison and Ronald were too. Then I noticed they all had mischievous glints in their eyes. Especially the boys. Oh Merlin. A prank. Then suddenly fireworks went flying around the room. Not just normal fireworks, oh no. They were all either red or gold. Then the last one went off and it was a lion. It chased after the Slytherins, who for some reason looked very panicked but yet stayed still. But then one person, Malfoy I presume, as he was nearly identical to Lucius, shouted, I'm stuck to the floor. I very almost laughed at the pure bewildered look on everyone's face after it ended. I looked over at the 4 young Gryffindors and they were howling with laughter. Harrison and Ron were on the floor, they were laughing so hard. Neville has his head on the table, shoulders raking in suppressed laughs. The girl, Hermione, was holding on to Neville for support. Then suddenly the boys on the floor stood up on the table and shouted, Go Go Gryffindor, the chant used in Quidditch games. I couldn't keep the smile off my face as I watched the rest of Gryffindor join in. Then I heard a chair scrape to my right and I looked up at the person. It was Minerva. Oh dear, boys, you better run. Potter, Weasley, Longbottom, Granger, she shouted, furiously. Yes, Minnie, Harrison shouted over the laughs. I couldn't help it this time, I laughed. Just like James and Sirius he is. Detention, Mr. Potter, tonight, cleaning the trophy room along with Miss Granger. Mr. Weasley and Mr. Longbottom, you will be doing lines in my office. What, you can't separate me and Ron, he pleaded. I snorted again. It was honestly like looking as James and Sirius. I could see her lips twitch, trying to keep a scowl on her face. He's got her wound around his finger. No exceptions, Mr. Potter. Oh man. He huffed and then pouted. And there's the serious side of him. With the pout. I stood up and walked to my classroom with a smile on my face as the memories flood through. And I had one thought on my mind. He's going to be hard to handle. Sheep is finally here, finally Mooney's dead a lesson with us. And like last time we were doing boggarts, except this time I had no idea what it would be, as I no longer feared Dementors, as I could literally talk to them. What do you think, Killian? Young master, I do not believe you will have one. Oh, what should I do? No worries, young master, it just means you don't really have a massive fear of anything. Oh cool. Yes, although Remus may find it weird, you're not even scared of boggarts and your classmates. Who cares? Exactly, young master. And with that I cut off the connection. Like last time Neville was up first, and again it was Snape that came out the boggarts. Go on, Nev, I cheered for him. He turned Snape drag, with his grandmother's clothes on. Wow, Neville, that vulture hat is a nice touch for Snivy. The entire of Gryffindor sniggered. Mr. Potter, please refrain from calling your professors names. Remus warned. Hypocrite. I muttered enough for him to hear, but nobody else, as he was a werewolf. He merely ignored me and pulled Ron up next. Skip time, Harrison's turn. I stood in front of the boggart, but this time it didn't morph into anything. A black shadow, the boggart flew back into the closet in fright after not being able to scare me. Everyone was confused. Remus looked shocked. Well, it seems Mr. Potter here doesn't have a boggart. Everyone was in awe at the fact I was basically fearless. Of course there were a few small fears here and there, but they weren't big enough to frighten me like a boggart would normally. So it couldn't really turn into that. Bloody freak, I heard a voice that I knew was Malfoy say. Remus was just about to say something when I turned around and said, "Shove off, you blonde ponce, we all know what your boggart would be. Running out of shampoo for your hair. Complete opposite of your godfather Snivelus." The class roared in laughter whilst Draco went bright red. "You'll meet the same end as your pathetic parents, Potter." I merely sniffed and said in the most sarcastic voice I could, "Yes, so pathetic they died to save their 1-year-old child that your daddy's master was after because he was throwing a temper tantrum like a toddler not a lot older than I was. So once more Draco, yes, they're so pathetic." Twat. Once more the class laughed at Draco. Finally Remus managed to get a word in and said, 10 points from Slytherin for insulting a fellow student's family. What about him? He said my father had a master." I cut Moony off as he was about to say something. "I was merely stating facts, Ferret." He went even redder and stomped out the classroom. "Oh, the temper on that one, maybe he needs his nap. Daphne, be a darling and check on him." She snorted and said, "Sure, whatever, Potter," and walked out after him. "Okay. That's the end of the lesson, everyone. Mr. Potter, can you stay behind, please?" I nodded at my friends to go on and walked over to Remus. "Yes, sir. I am merely going to ask you how you knew I was being hypocritical about the name-calling." I snorted, "Eidetic memory, Uncle Moony." "If I may still call you that?" He nodded. "Of course, Cub." "If I may." I nodded. "So an eidetic memory, Yeah, it was probably on my birth certificate, but I don't exactly expect you to remember it as there was quite a lot on there." He snorted. "That's an understatement, Cub." I smiled and then my self-restraint snapped and I hugged him tightly before saying, "I missed you, Uncle Moony." He was a little bit shocked by the big but quickly hugged me back and said, "Me too, Cub, me too." After a while off catching up he said I was welcome back whenever, and with that I left for Charms. Chapter 17. Go and check out my other story, which is complete Hadrian Potter, there on my profile page. Harrison's POV. It was getting closer to the Quidditch game with the Dementors. I wasn't nervous at all this time. Instead I would just go and talk to them before the game and ask them to stay away from the pitch. So that's exactly what I'm doing now. I walked down to the edge of the forest where one was posted and talked to it. I knew they'd spread the message anyway. They practically worship any human who can speak their language. Stay away, the Dementor warned. I could already feel its effect and it was horrible. But still I continued forward with tightened shields and spoke. "Sorry to disturb you, Guard of Azkaban, but I must plead for you to tell the others to stay away from the Quidditch game tomorrow. You can speak our language, certainly I will pass on the message, young one." That is an impressive feat for someone to learn the language of the dead so young. "Yes, thank you, but I must get going. Don't want anyone snitching to the teachers about me talking to Dementors, no offense." "None taken. I understand the press having heard lots of humans talking about it. Shame I can't talk back as they wouldn't understand." "Goodbye. Bye, young one." And with that I left to go back to the castle. Back to planning pranks. Sheep. Today is the day of the Quidditch match and like usual the team is bewildered how I'm so calm, seeing as it's pelting down and literally thunderstorming with lightning. All the teachers were in attendance and I knew Padfoot would be hiding in the vacant stands watching. Everyone was already soaked through. I cast warming charms and water-repelling charms on their goggles. Not much you can do for the robes. Only drying charm afterwards. We all mounted our brooms and went soaring into the sky against Slytherin this time, as I had stopped Draco from getting hit by Buckbeak by forcing my magic in between. At least Malfoy owes me now. The match was most likely going to end in injuries, as somehow the rain seemed even worse than last time, and it was against the Slytherins who were notorious for foul plays. This year me and Alicia Spinnet switched roles on the team, so I was a chaser and she was a seeker. It was mainly because I was so damn tall whilst she was tiny. Literally about 5'5". Also my build suited chaser. Tall and strong. I could have gone for beater, but the Weasley twins are great. Plus for a beater it's better to be slightly shorter, as the bludgers are coming towards you for you to whack with the bar. You don't want to get your head taken off. So bring chaser this year was great. I was even better than playing seeker, scoring like 10 goals every game. Lee Jordan was commentating like always and went through the Slytherin team and then with much more enthusiasm said the Gryffindor team. "We have got our keeper, Oliver Wood. Outbeaters, Fred and George Weasley. Our seeker Alicia Spinnet. And our 3 favorite chasers, Katie Bell, Angelina Johnson, and our star player, Harrison Potter. Go, go, Gryffindor. Go, go, Gryffindor was roared so loudly you could hear it over the thunder. It was deafening but amazing. Johnson passes to Bell, Bell to Potter, and wait for it, ladies and gentlemen, Harrison Potter has scored the first point for Gryffindor 100. After about 10 minutes, the score was 60-20 to Gryffindor. Katie had scored 2, I scored 3, and Angelina scored 1. Then suddenly lightning struck Angelina's broom and set it on fire, sending her to the ground. She would probably have a broken arm and concussion, but not too much to worry about. Oh no, Johnson's down. We have no reserve chasers as they are all ill in the infirmary. Gryffindor now can only play with their remaining chasers. The chant of Go, Go, Gryffindor had risen to support us. Alicia, get that snitch soon, Oliver shouted. She nodded and flew off. After another 15 minutes, the score had gone up to 13,070 to Gryffindor. Angelina had only scored the 1 from earlier before being struck down. Katie has scored 5 and I had scored the remaining 7. Come on, Spinnet, get that snitch. Even after a further 10 minutes she hadn't caught it. The Slytherins had caught up and it was now 150-130 Gryffindor. We're in the lead, but only just. If the Slytherin seeker catches the snitch, we'd lose. Katie, we need another player, I hollered to her. She nodded but then said, I know, Harrison, but there's nobody, so we've just got to try very hard. If we lose, the team won't be angry, as it's only US 2. I nodded but still was worried we'd lose. 45 minutes later, yes, they've been playing this long. The score was 280,140. Somehow me and Katie had managed to score loads more goals. Especially after one of the beaters got struck down. And their keeper broke her arm. But credit to her for continuing. It wouldn't matter, as if Slytherins caught the snitch, they'd win by 10 points. Suddenly I heard Lee. Oh no, you dirty scum. Lee Jordan, Minnie said. No, Professor, he just pushed her off her broom. Spinnet is out of the game. And oh, me and the team all hollered in horror. Then I had an idea. If could get 2 more goals just before they caught the snitch, we would win. Eventually Katie got 1 more. This meant we would draw, but I wanted to win. We are winning this, guys. I am getting that point even. If I break both my arms and legs, I yelled to the team. They all gave me looks of appreciation and also some worried faces. I don't quite think they think you mean you will literally willingly break your bones to get that goal. But I know you, young master, and I know you will, said Death. Higgs had spotted the snitch. OHS almost got it. Come on, Potter or Bell, just 1 more goal please, Lee said over the megaphone. Potter, we aren't going to win, Katie said. I smirked and shook my head. Yes, we are, I promise. She shook her head in disagreement. Said Fate. Yes. Yes, it does. I heard everyone shout that he's almost got the snitch, but I wasn't listened. I intercepted a pass by the Slytherin chasers. Shot forward as fast as my Nimbus would go. Just as I was going to throw it, one of the beaters hit a bludger at me. I wouldn't make the goal if I dodged it, so I let it hit me. Just as it hit me, their keeper came in front of me trying to block me. I took a deep breath and said in my head, it's now or never, Harrison. And I jumped over him, off my broom and through the quaffle. I saw it go flying through the hoop just as the bludger came into contact with my chest, sending me spiraling to the floor. But just before I hit the ground, I heard the shout of Lee saying, 2 can't believe it, out star player Harrison Potter. 1. The game for Gryffindor. He got the quaffle through the hoop just before Higgs caught the snitch. Gryffindor win. And then I hit the floor. I didn't have time to pull out my wand and the teachers were too shocked by the outcome, thinking we had no chance, to save me. So I went straight plummeting into the ground at about 60 miles per hour. Not even a wizard could survive this, but he's the master of death. All around the stadium, the sickening crack of my body hitting the floor was heard. Third POV. Everyone went silent as they watched Gryffindor's star chaser plummet into the ground with a sickening crack. Even the Slytherins looked horrified, knowing there was no way anyone could have survived that. Harrison, Hermione screamed. Everyone was running onto the pitch to check the boy, already many knowing full well he was dead. Dumbledore, Poppy, and Minerva pushes through to the front. When they got to the boy, their hearts stopped. Harrison was laying in a pool of blood at least 3 feet wide on either side of his head. His legs and arms were bent funny, showing the broken bones, but the oddest thing was the painfully slow rise and fall of the player's chest. "Hes alive," Poppy said. Cheers went all around the stadium as Albus levitated him onto a stretcher, and they all hurried inside. Chapter 18. Harrison's POV. When I fell, I went into my mindscape to escape the pain. This is what Frank and Alice Longbottom did whilst being tortured. But because they kept getting the spell they were unable to come out, therefore they spiraled into insanity. When I went in there, I could actually see and talk to Killian and the others. "Well, that happened," I said. "Yes, I do believe it did," young Harrison. Fate said dryly. "Well, young master, I do believe you followed through on your plan of breaking both legs and arms, and maybe a few other bones," Killian said whilst watching life wearily. What were the injuries?" "Both legs broken. Both arms broken. 6 ribs broken. 1 puncture in the lung from the broken ribs causing you to hack up blood. Broken jaw. Fractured left collarbone and a massive gash on the back of your head." Fate said irritably. "Ouch. Yes, I do believe it would have hurt. Just a tad." Fate said sarcastically. "Okay, so Poppy is healing me now." "Yes, young master."
YLYIFIF.
"It is true," I said wearily. She just huffed. "Eventually they healed me up and I woke up." Sheep. I opened my eyes to see the entire Quidditch team surrounding me just like last time. "He looks a bit peaky," Ron said.
Nos chitronal.
I internally snorted. "What do you expect?" He went plummeting down to the ground at about 60 miles per hour, Fred said. "Yes, let's throw you off your broom back at the burrow and see what you look like," George said. "He's probably look a lot better," I said cheerfully, and then sat up. I looked up at them and they all had their mouths hanging open. "Did I get the point?" I said hopefully. They all continued to stare until Katie said in a dazed voice, "Yeah. You won us the game." "Yes, I told you, Katie," I beamed. She just laughed and said, "Damn Harrison, I can't believe you're just sitting up." I know. "I'm amazing," I mock arrogantly said. They all snorted. "Gave everyone, even the Slytherins, a right scare, little brother," said George. "You see, I've literally became like their little brother with all the pranks I do. They never prank me because I'm the only one to get them the right way around, and they love a fellow prankster, and I scare them slightly. Being the Marauder's son and all. You should know by now I tend not to die," I said happily. I then shocked them all but hopping out of bed and walking normally, as if I hadn't broken my legs, to Angelina and hugged her. "Nice to see you're up and moving again, Ange. How in Merlin's name are you walking? But yeah, nice to see you too," she exclaimed. "Oh, my magic has fully healed me after Poppy did her best." "Don't let her hear you call her that," Harrison Oliver warned. "So did we won, huh?" They all nodded in confirmation. Good. "But did in first?" "Yes. Yeah, by 7 points," Oliver excitedly said. "We are winning this cup. It'll be the 3rd time I row," Oliver said smugly. "Yeah, and all because of me," I said just as smugly, causing everyone to snigger at my perfect imitation of wood. Sheep. I don't think anyone was expecting me to sit down in the Great Hall the next morning for breakfast as everyone looked up and just stared. "Well, I know I'm attractive and all, but please, it's rude to stare, you know," I said, and then walked on over to the red and gold-clad table and plopped myself down in between Neville and Ron, with Hermione sitting beside Ron and the twins in front of us. Eventually they all stopped staring when Dumbledore stood up and said, "Well, it's lovely to have you back up and moving, Mr. Potter." I dipped my head in thanks, then turned back and said to my friends, Prank time," they all said. We all hid our wands in our sleeves but slowly turned towards the other 3 tables and charmed every single person's hair neon pink. "Shake my hair," was shouted all round. We all started howling in laughter. "Ooh, Merlin, they look like candy floss," Hermione laughed. This caused us to erupt into more laughter. All 3 Weasleys, Mr. Potter, Miss Granger and Mr. Longbottom, Minnie shouted. "Yes, Minnie, me," and Ron cheekily said. Her eye twitched in annoyance but kept her calm and said, "Turn their hair back." I pretended to think for a moment but then decided to say, "I'm terribly sorry, Minnie, but I am unable to, as it must wear off. Also, lovely choice of wardrobe, I must say," and then ran whilst laughing loudly, much to everyone's amusement. Minnie must have looked down at herself and saw she was now sporting neon yellow robes, and her hat was dark blue with bright green polka dots, because I heard her hollering after me, "Mr. Potter," and that set everyone off. even the teachers into roaring laughter that probably could have been heard in Hogsmeade. End of chapter. Please go check out my brand new story. It's on my profile called Too Far Gone. It's set in Harry's 5th year. It's basically him spiraling into depression and becoming suicidal. After Cedric's death and him being abused at home. Chapter 19. Harrison's POV. Today is the day that Padfoot drags Ron into the Shrieking Shack. Like last time, he did enter Gryffindor Tower and scratch the portrait looking for Scabbers Peter. And today is the day we meet him, and I couldn't wait. I wondered if Neville would be here this time. Sheep. This was it. Hermione had punched Draco in the face. Then we went to Hagrid's hut and then back up to the castle past the Whomping Willow. And just like last time, Scabbers bit Ron and ran. But this time I decided to run after him, so just as Ron went to run I said, "I'll get him, Ron." "Thanks, mate." Neville wasn't here like last time. He was helping Sprout with potting some new plant thing. I managed to catch Scabbers faster than Ron had. So Padfoot would have to drag me down the hill and into the tree. "This is gonna hurt, isn't it?" said Chaos happily. For some reason he was always happy to see me hurt. Not in a nasty way, but because it caused chaos, which he obviously loved. Somehow I still didn't see Padfoot coming, and it was Ron again. I knew he was coming but didn't see it. Hermione and Ron both ducked as I whipped my head around to see why Ron hollered, but then I saw the black dog about 2 inches away from me and remembered. I couldn't exactly dodge him without them being suspicious of how I knew he was there when I was looking the other way. So he pounced on me, sending me flying backwards even though I was almost 6 foot tall. He was a huge dog, so shut up. I landed on a stone, breaking at least 3 ribs. I heard the snap of my ribs. Padfoot must have, as well, as he let out a slight whine. He then dragged me by the leg down the hill, me hitting all sorts of twigs and stones, cutting me. "Ouch, Padfoot, will you be careful? Young master, he can't hear you, you know." "Oh yeah." I could have told him telepathically, but that might freak him out. So I let him drag me. He managed to dodge all the branches from the tree and drag me inside. I could see the branch hit Ron and Hermione back. They all must have found it odd how I barely made a noise. The only time I did was when I said "OF," when Padfoot knocked me over. And a few ouchs. When he dragged me inside, a metal thing stabbed me in the chest. It hurt, but I had a high tolerance, so I didn't make a noise. "What on earth was that?" FPP Life said. "Weight used to be." She nodded. "It's not gonna fall down, is it?" She shook her head. "But Ron never got cut with it, that's not fair." F Chaos said cheerfully. "Git." That didn't do much, as it just made him chuckle. I looked down at my chest and it was gushing. I was gonna kill Padfoot. It was getting all over my shirt and ruining my good looks. The deities snorted, saying how much more arrogant I was in this life. But I didn't care. I was happy to be full of confidence. I'm pretty sure I had a concussion, as I had hit my head at least 1,000 times, especially on the stairs. I knew they'd follow us after about 10 minutes and Mooney would come in about 15 minutes. Mooney managed to catch Ron with the map and confiscated it. I luckily put a charm on it to hide my name to everyone but the Marauders and my 3 friends. They did the same. So Mooney could still see me being dragged by Padfoot. I was pulled into the room that Ron had been put in last time and then pushed me against the wall. He turned back into human form and I felt like throwing the dumb rat at his stupid face. "Hello, Peter," he said madly. I raised an eyebrow and went to say "What about me?" but got cut off as we heard Ron and Hermione's voices. Sirius hid behind the door. I rolled my eyes. What a hiding spot! 10 points to Gryffindor. They both burst into the room and said, "Harry, are you all right?" Yes, I'm fine. But just so you know, that stupid mutt is an animagus." I said this in the most James voice possible, which wasn't hard as we had very similar voices. They both turned around quickly and, like last time, Sirius pushed the door closed to reveal his ragged face, looking rather old. Sirius. I snorted. All 3 of them looked at me, 2 of them looking at me as if I was nutty as a fruitcake and one of them hiding an equally nutty smile. "Well, I could say you're looking much older to Harry," he replied in a hoarse voice. I laughed and said, "But I look good, Padfoot. You just look like a wet mop." "Harrison, do you want him to kill you?" Hermione hollered in pure anger and terror. I stood on my broken left leg and limped over. Sirius muttered a "sit down," but I ignored it. I walked right over to Sirius and hugged him, then turned to the 2 behind me who had 2 identical looks of horror on their faces and cheekily said, "Well, I'd like to see him try." I heard him snort behind me and say, "At least someone realized I wouldn't kill my own godson." even if it was actually my godson who figured it out. He said the first bit loudly but then muttered the last bit, but I still caught it and laughed. Yes, well, I'm just brilliant, aren't I said arrogantly. What the hell is going on? Ron asked frantically. I could see Hermione trying to piece it together, but she didn't know about Peter, so it was quite a hard thing to do. It was you, was it? She finally said to Sirius. He smiled sadly and said no. Then who? Peter Pettigrew, said someone's tired voice. Remus, Sirius said happily. He rolled his eyes and said, looking rather ragged, and showing the madness within. Well, you'd know all about the madness within, wouldn't you, Remus? Sirius cheekily said. I laughed at the cheek of him whilst Remus snorted. Hermione also seemed to be holding in a smile. Oh yes, she worked it out, as did Neville this time. Maybe we should tell Ron what's going on. He looks as if he's about to explode, I suggested whilst leaning on Sirius quite a bit as I was getting light-headed from blood loss. So that's exactly what they did, and when he said to prove it, they both got their wands out and tried to turn him back. Like last time I walked, well, this time limped to the door frame to stop him from getting out, and Sirius managed to hit him with the spell to force him back to human. He turned around, looking wildly. Hermione and Ron looked really shocked. I didn't even bat an eyelid, seeing as I knew it was coming. Instead, I merely sat on the floor in front of the doorframe. Remus, Sirius, my old friends. Peter sniveled. Then he tried to run out the door, but I stood up, swaying slightly, and punched him, knocking him backwards with a broken nose. You're not going to get any sympathy out of me, mate, I said angrily. He glared at me, trying to seem intimidating, but it didn't really work, as he was possibly one of the shortest men I'd ever met, standing at 5'5". Harrison, look at you, you look so much like your father and of course your mother's eyes. We were the best of friends. The two other Marauders went to speak, but I cut them off. Yes, well, I've heard I inherited something else off my mother. Her infamous temper. But apparently mine's even worse. A lot more scary, I am supposedly. Would you like to find out? No, well then I suppose you stop blubbering like a baby and get ready for the Dementors to come and kiss you goodbye, I said the first bit in the darkest, coldest voice I could. Not much of a challenge when I had some of death's magic running through me. The last sentence was said in a cheerful voice, not even minding what I had said. Sirius and Remus has gone pale when I spoke of my mother's temper and being known for having a worse one. Well, you heard him, Wormtail, Sirius said with a shark-like grin. Once more he started begging for mercy on his knees, but I just kicked him in the stomach. Just as Remus lifted him up, I stood up swaying badly. Not that anyone noticed still, and just as I looked up, Peter was running at me. He tackled me down the stairs. I could feel my shoulder snap as I hit the third step. The others shouted after us. Peter, Harrison, end of chapter. B. Chapter 20. Harrison's POV. My vision and hearing were blurred. I couldn't see properly and everything sounded so far away. It took a few seconds to get my senses back to normal, but as soon as I did, I felt an awful pain shooting up and down my body, starting with my legs and ending at my head. Peter, Harrison. I looked around wildly, having come back to my senses fully, remembering Wormtail had tackled me down the stairs. Except instead of making it down to the bottom, with the combined weight of me and him, the stairs broke and we fell through to the bottom floor, breaking all 3 staircases on the way down. Peter has landed on me, so he barely got hurt, maybe a slight concussion, but that's it. I, on the other hand, had landed full force on the sodden dusty floor. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. Harrison, are you okay? Oh, just spiffing, love, I said cheekily, but let out a small whimper of pain when I laughed. Broken ribs, definitely, Life said angrily. Ron was guarding Peter with Sirius, so Remus came over to me, especially when he heard the whimper of his cub. When he saw me, his eyes flashed bright amber as his wolf took over. He let out a whine at the sight of my many broken bones, but then an even louder one at the blood gushing out of my chest from where Padfoot had dragged me over the metal rod earlier. After a while, Remus took back control and came over, but I said to him, we should probably go, Mione. It's the full moon, I said, gasping for air as blood filled my lungs. Must have punctured one of them. Both of them, actually, little one. Killian, I am not little. Well, compared to me, you're like a newborn baby. I rolled my eyes mentally. Remus had gone pale after I said that for 2 reasons. 1, I was coughing up blood, and 2, he hadn't taken his potion. Oh shit, he said, not caring about his language. I pushed the pain to the back of my mind, and using the wall behind me I got to my knees and then slowly and very painfully pushed myself to my feet, shocking them all. "Harrison, let me help you," Hermione said. "Cub, be careful please and hurry, you're losing blood too quickly," he said worriedly. I nodded absent-mindedly and leaning heavily on Hermione hobbled over time the other three. Sirius slung my left arm over his right shoulder as I was about 1 inch shorter than him, so it was easier. Hermione, being only 5'3", couldn't properly hold me up. I was really light-headed and weak, so Ron, who was taller than Hermione but still a fair few inches shorter than me, slung my overarm over his shoulder. Ron was roughly 5'8", still tall for 13 but not as tall. Hermione levitated Peter out of the shack. "Wait, where is Snape this time?" "Ah, that's our doing, young master. I mean, with all the crashing and falling about we thought added Snape to the mix would be too much." "Yes, but he protected us from Werewolf Lupin." "Not really, young master, only 1 scratch to the chest was what he took for you. And plus this time round it won't matter as Remus it's staying in the shack." "Oh yeah, forgot about that." We hobbled out of the shack. I was bleeding really heavily now and was slipping in and out of consciousness. "Come on Harrison, mate, stay with us," I heard Ron's voice say frantically. We were now safely outside the shack. We all sat on the grass, so Sirius could stop the bleeding with my wand. Just before I fell unconscious, Sirius shook me hard to keep me awake. "Come on pup, stay awake." He healed the cut so I wouldn't lose any more blood, but I still needed a blood replenishing potion and to have my bones healed. Plus I was still coughing up blood. Suddenly I hacked up loads of blood, way more this time. "He's not going to make it all the way up there, his lungs must be punctured. Both of them for him to be coughing up this much," Sirius told the other two. I slipped unconscious once more, and the last thing I saw was a man coming towards us before I closed my eyes. Dun dun dun. Chapter 21. Hermione's POV. When Harrison blacked out fully, I saw the reflection of a man in his eyes behind me. I turned round, wand raised ready to attack if necessary. It was Snape. "Why is Snap here?" "Black," he barked. Tad ironic, seeing as Sirius is a dog animagus. "Snivelus. How nice of you to join us," Sirius mock cheered. I choked at the nickname Sirius gave him. It was what Harrison and the boys called him. "Step aside, Black. I will call for the Dementors. They are so longing to see you," he taunted. "Sir, it wasn't him, it was Peter, he's that man over there by Ron." I tried to tell him, but he wouldn't listen, to focused on Sirius. "Bribed a child, I see," he sneered. Sirius just sneered right back, face full of disgust and hate towards the potions professor. I couldn't really blame him, Snape was a horrid man. Suddenly a howl went up in the air, causing Snape to involuntarily shudder. Seems he is frightened of them. Can't really blame him. I took that moment to stun him. "Why'd you do that, Hermione?" Ron asked. "He was getting in the way, and quite frankly I don't want my best friend to die," I huffed, pointing to Harrison. That got them to move quicker. Sirius went over to Harrison and picked him up. He was careful not to jostle any injuries as not to further them. Ron re-stunned Peter as he was waking up and levitated him inside. Sirius made himself and Harrison invisible with Harrison's wand, as it would be a disaster if anyone saw him, especially so close to Harrison. "Sheep." Ron's POV. I followed Hermione and Sirius inside, levitating Peter Pettigrew, making sure to hit his head on all the doorways. I got Sirius to make Peter invisible and walked up to the headmaster's office with them. Hermione's POV. Lemon drop. I tried. Blood pop. Nothing. "Oh, for Merlin's sake, what's the password?" Acid drop. The gargoyle moves aside to allow us entry. We knocked on the door. "Come on, Miss Granger." How does he know who it is every damn time? I opened the door and went in. The elderly headmaster was sitting at his desk writing something. "What can I do for you, Miss Granger?"
Vel Sirius Blackis innocentant Peter Pettigrew visalive.
I said really quickly. He looked bewildered as to what I said. "Sorry, Miss Granger, can you repeat that slower?" I nodded and took a deep calming breath. "Sirius Black is innocent. Peter Pettigrew is alive, and he was James and Lily Potter's secret keeper." His face morphed from confusion to downright shock and disbelief. I took the spell of Sirius, Harrison, and Peter. Dumbledore stood up quickly, turning his wand on Sirius, his former student. Mr. Black, if you are innocent you will consent to Veritaserum, of course. That's all I wanted 12 years ago, he said. What? Dumbledore asked, befuddled. I never got a trial, Albus. The headmaster's face went still. I could see his eyes burning in anger. I see. Well, if you would. Sirius nodded and allowed the headmaster to our 3 drops of the truth serum. Sirius' eyes glazed over and his face went completely blank. Name, Sirius Orion Black 3. His voice was completely monotone. Date of birth, 3rd of November 1959. What schoolhouse were you in, Gryffindor? Who was your 3 best friends whilst at school? James Fleamont Potter, Remus John Lupin and Peter Pettigrew. Were you the secret keeper of James and Lily Potter in the First Wizarding War? And did you sell them out to Lord Voldemort? No, Peter was the secret keeper, as we believed it would throw Voldemort off. I would never have sold them out. Did you or did you not kill Peter and 12 muggles? No, I didn't kill any of them. I admit I wish I had killed Peter, and that's what I was aiming to do, but he turned into his animagus form and blew up the street before cutting his finger off. The explosion alone killed all 12 muggles. What is his animagus form? A rat. Funnily enough, Dumbledore then gave Sirius the antidote. Oh, Merlin. I blinked. The headmaster never seemed so out of character. It was an odd thing to see here. I need to go to the ministry with you too. Follow me and Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley if you would rush young Mr. Potter to the infirmary for Poppy to treat his wounds. I nodded and levitated Harrison and ran to the hospital wing with Ronald. When we got there, Madame Pomfrey didn't even ask questions. That's what I loved about her. She never asked questions about how it happened unless she really had to. Let me do a quick health check. It shouldn't be more than a few broken bones and a punctured lung. She waved her wand over him and gasped straight away. I tried to ask her what was wrong, but she pushed me and ran out. I managed to catch a glimpse of the list, and it was awful. Broken left femur bone, upper leg thigh, broken right collarbone, 2 punctured lungs, 3 broken ribs, major concussion, fractured jaw, major blood loss from open wound in chest, major blood loss from punctured lungs. And then I was shoved out of the room. Chapter 22. Harrison's POV. I woke up groggily. It was roughly 1 p.m. according to time, who for once came to visit me. Even if it was when I was practically dead. I turned my head but winced. Suppose I'm not fully healed yet. Give it a few seconds for our magic to heal you, young master. I waited for about 9 seconds until I felt completely healed. It was as if nothing happened, although my chest was a little sore still. I looked around for Madame Pomfrey from my bed but couldn't see her. Poppy, my throat was really dry and my voice sounded as if I hadn't used it for years. Poppy still didn't come, so me being me, I decided to hop out of bed even with a newly healed broken leg that was still tender and hobble into her office. When I got in there, she was filling out forms. Most likely ordering new potions for her patients. Poppy, can I leave? I whined. She jumped violently and whipped her head up to look at who it was. When she saw me, she stood straight up and marched me back over to the bed. I think not, young man, get back into bed. It's a miracle you even survived, let alone up and walking. But Poppy, I whined even louder. Don't Poppy me, Mr. Potter. You will lay down and you will stay down, she said sternly, although there was a hint of amused exasperation. I huffed and pouted for quite a long time after that, much to the great amusement of the conscious patients currently in the medical wing and Poppy herself. Even the deities wouldn't stop laughing at my childish behavior. Sheep. Alby's POV. Yes, Albie. I stepped out of the fireplace, Sirius and Peter, who was in a cage, in tow. As soon as I stepped out, I made sure to cast a powerful notice me nor charm on all of us. Couldn't have everyone gawking at the 3 of us when we had much more pressing matters on hand. All those years ago, I couldn't quite believe that Mr. Black was the one who betrayed young James and Lily Potter, but the evidence was overwhelming. James had told me they were picking him for the secret keeper. Then when he was arrested, he was found laughing maniacally, saying it was my fault I killed James and Lily, but he must have only been in shock. I gracefully swept through the crowds, dodging the people who were all unable to see me, and made my way to the head of the DMLE's office. And, is it just me, or is honestly so hard to write in Albus POV, like he's so different to everyone else? He's pretty posh but not snobby. At the same time, he's quite sassy with a sense of humor. But then he also has a slightly mad insane side. For instance, Now that you're all watered and fed. Talking to his own students as if they're plants, or when he says his start-of-year speech. Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. So hard. I politely knocked on the door to Amelia's office, as she was the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Come in. I entered and took off the charms. She immediately raised her wand at the sight of the escaped convict. You found him, she asked, shocked. I nodded. But when she went to send a body bind towards him, I quickly cut in and spoke. Amelia, he's innocent, I told her calmly. Her lips tightened into a straight line, not unlike my dear friend Minerva. Albus, I know you think everyone deserves second chances, but please, he is innocent of all the crimes he committed, Madame Bones. Her face went incredulous. You can't be serious. I heard a snort from behind and turned to find Sirius hiding a smirk. When he looked up, having felt eyes on him, he chuckled and said, No, he is not, but I am. My lips twitched at the sight of my former pupil making an old joke and turned my attention back to Amelia. I used Veritaserum on Mr. Black here, and he never even got a trial. That got her to listen, but when she heard the second part she was fuming. What, how can they throw the Lord to an ancient and noble house into Azkaban without a trial? Believe me, I've been thinking that for 12 years, Amelia, Sirius said. Her eyes softened when she looked back towards him, now knowing the truth. We will get you that trial, Mr. Black. In fact, we will do it now. We both nodded in agreement whilst she went to call an emergency Weisengamot. Is this how you spell it meeting? Sheep. Harrison's POV. I was finally released from Poppy's grasp when I managed to irritate her that much from my constant whining and pouting. I walked up to the Gryffindor Tower, knowing classes would be over in about 10 minutes. I decided to catch up on my arithmetic homework. Yeah, instead of last time I decided to choose ancient runes and arithmetic. I sometimes used Hermione's turn timer for extra time on homework, as I had pretended to find out about it. She made me promise not to tell anyone else, but of course I managed to persuade her to let me tell Ron and Neville, as they were my best friends as well. Ron and Neville, along with the twins, had really become like my brothers this time. I felt as if me and Ron were twins, just with different appearances. We were just slightly closer than the other two. Hermione and Ginny were more like sisters this time round. I had liked Ginny last time, but now the love had long faded. I was a bit more of a player now. Obviously I was still a virgin in this life, being only 13, but I knew that would soon change, seeing as I was mentally a lot older. I would probably become sexually active next year, and I knew I would be a one-and-done kind of guy this time round, as cringe that sounded. I also realized I was bisexual as well, but I was not ashamed about it. Instead, I openly flirted with both genders and succeeded rather well, if you ask me. Finally, after a few long minutes, the portrait opened. The common room filling with students of all ages wearing red and gold ties. I sought out my 3 best friends and hugged them tightly when I found them. Merlin Harrison, how are you alive? Hermione said, rather shocked. Yeah. My magic sort of helped out quite a bit. She whacked me on the forehead, but then burst into tears, hugging me as if I was about to drop dead any second. Don't you ever scare me like that again, Harrison. James Denver Potter, she said, whilst tears were profusely pouring out of her eyes. I nodded dumbly, unable to say anything with such an emotional Hermione clinging to me like a lifeline. You sure you're good, mate? Neville asked. Yeah, I'm fine. Honest. I told them truthfully. Okay, good. Ron said happily. We all went up to our dorm, sneaking Hermione up with us, and began to plot our end-of-year prank, this time on the teachers. Chapter 23. Albus POV. We were all currently waiting for the lords and ladies of the old pureblood families to arrive for the trial. Sirius was chained tightly to the chair by magic, and there were Dementors on either side of him. After around 10 minutes, everyone had arrived, and the trial began. Welcome, lords and ladies, to the trial of one Sirius Orion Black 3. Fudge said. Excuse me, Minister, but why is there another trial if he is guilty? And there was a kiss on sight order for the Dementors. No disrespect, sir. Lord Greengrass said. Of course, Lord Greengrass, you see here. Lord Black never received a trial those 12 years ago. He said. I grimaced, just waiting for the outrage over the Lord Black getting thrown into prison without trial. What, that's an outrage, was heard all around the room. The minister shot loud sparks into the air. Judges tend not to use gavels in the UK courts, and shouted for silence. We will now proceed. Lord Black, do you consent to truth serum? Yes, Minister. He said hoarsely. A young ministry worker walked calmly over to him and poured 3 drops down his throat. Sirius' eyes glazed over after drinking it. Name: Sirius Orion Black 3. It is in working order, Minister, Madam Bones. They nodded and began. Were you James and Lily Potter's secret keeper? Madam Bones asked. No, he replied in a monotone voice. Gasps filled the room. Again shouts of outrage at the minister. Silence. Cornelius boomed. Did you murder Peter Pettigrew and 12 muggles? No, it was my intention to kill Peter. I admit that freely, but I didn't get the chance. He began to shout about how I'd betrayed James and Lily, and then blew up the street behind him to frame me, and then chopped off his finger to make it look as if I'd murdered him in cold blood. He then turned into his animagus form, a rat funny enough, and fled down the sewers. An illegal animagus, yes, madam. She nodded and then said, why were you found laughing manically at the scene? I was so shocked that little cowardly Peter was actually the one to betray us and sell James and Lily to Voldemort. Shudders went around the room at the sound of his name, but Amelia soon shushed them. Well, I say we vote now, Cornelius. He nodded. Very well. Those in favor of sending him back to Azkaban. No wands lit up in the chamber to show they thought him guilty. They couldn't. It was impossible. He had been trialed under truth serum, and it was not physically possible to lie under it, unlike the imperious curse which you could build a resistance to. All in favor of dropping all charges. All the wands in the room lit up to show they had found him innocent. Lord Black, you have been found innocent and will be paid 5,000 galleons a year for each year you were in Azkaban. We will also be paying for you to go to a mind healer at St. Mungo's for a year. And that was the end of the trial. Sheep. Harrison's POV. We had planned a prank, and for the lack of better words, it was a beautiful idea. It would entertain everyone except the teachers who were involved. I would bet my life that even most Slytherins would be roaring in laughter by the end of it. We all sat down for our end-of-year feast. We had ordered Dobby to put a potion in each of the teachers' drink that would activate after everyone had finished eating. You see, I had made Dobby my person house elf this time round, with being paid a galleon every week and 1 day off a month. He said he didn't want any more time off than once a month, and if I badly needed him, even on his day off, he would still come. I tried to persuade him to take at least 3 days off, but he went nutty, so I agreed with him. Of course, I had to explain to Hermione that house elves loved to work for wizards and witches, as she was very upset. When she realized that he honestly loved it, she loosened up. Dobby worked in the kitchens when I didn't need him, as otherwise he would be rather bored. He wore mismatched socks, with the most abnormal patterns on, and a tunic with the Potter crest on, as it would be ridiculous to have all of my house crests on and black trousers. I allowed him to keep on the socks, as I didn't have the heart to tell him that it looked ridiculous. But to be honest, he kinda owned then. He made them look pretty amazing. Everyone could see the teachers were on high alert and edge that night, but they must have thought they were safe as the school's house elves cooked the food. They only seem slightly on edge this year. Ron observed. Yes, I believe they are underestimating us, thinking we will revert back to a fireworks show. I told them. Neville nodded and told me he thought so too. We all evilly smirked when we saw Dumbledore stand up. Dumbledore is obviously back by now, as it is hours later. Sirius is in St. Mungo's with the mind healers. Harrison has already been informed, as has Remus. Also, Remus still got found out this year thanks to Snape, so he still had to resign. Suddenly all the teachers got to their feet and turned to the person to their right, unless they were at the end of the table obviously, and paired up. Everyone, including the teachers, looked bewildered. I shot a spell into the air whilst me and the other 3 shouted, "Dance time, everyone, welcome to the annual end-of-year prank courtesy of Harrison Potter, Ronald Weasley, Neville Longbottom and Hermione Granger." Applauses went all around, and suddenly the teachers begun to do the waltz around the room. It was rather humorous watching Snivy dance with Minnie with the biggest sneer on his face I'd ever seen, whilst Minnie had a scowl. Then there was Sprout dancing with Professor Sinastra and Dumbledore dancing with Sybil, which was very funny. But the most amusing had to be Hagrid and Flitwick. Mainly because of the size difference. When they all went to twirl their partners, instead of whoever was leading the dance do it, the other person did it. So Minnie twirled Snape and Flitwick twirled Hagrid. The entire hall was in hysterics, laughing so hard they all had tears streaming down their faces. Everyone could see the teachers all trying very hard to reverse the prank, but as it was in their system as they digested the potion, It was irreversible until it wore off or they drunk the counter potion which nobody had. Sweet mother of Merlin, I can't breathe, I gasped. Everyone else was just as bad, with bright red faces from laughing. Even the Slytherins were all howling with laughter at the sight of Dumbledore twirling around in his hideous yellow and orange robes. Dumbledore looks like an oversized bee banana, I semi-shouted. This sent everyone, and I mean everyone, off into peals of laughter. At this point most of the teachers had realized it wasn't going to stop until they waited it out, so instead began to enjoy the dancing. But some still were trying, like Snape and Vector, a female who taught arithmancy. After about 20 minutes of continuous dancing it finally wore off. All the students had had a right laugh at their misfortunes. Potter, Longbottom, Weasley, Granger, practically all the teachers roared. Although many were incredibly embarrassed or just downright exasperated in a half-amused, half-angry way. We ended up with only 10 points being removed, much to Snape's displeasure, and a week of detentions when we returned after the holidays. Gryffindor won the House and Quidditch Cup. Minnie was ecstatic and had basically forgotten about the prank. Even Dumbledore had a chuckle at the entirety of the teacher's predicament. After the feast Dumbledore told me I would be able to see Sirius next year at the end of the summer. I was sad I had to wait next year, but it happened last time, except this time he'd be free and his mind healed. I was excited to see him again, even if it was next year. Do you reckon it will be the same as last time with going to Grimmauld Place in the last week of the summer before 5th year? Chaos and Mischief said, very pleased with the pranks I had done all year. And with that we all went back to the platform in Hogsmeade. Ronald telling me that he had spare tickets to the Quidditch World Cup for me and Hermione, as Nevillus Gran had agreed to take him. We then boarded the Scarlet Engine and went off on our way back to England. Chapter 24, Harrison's POV. I stepped off the Hogwarts Express and made my way through the barrier to where my family were. By Harrison, Hermione called from behind me. Ron and Neville had been operated by their relatives back home already. I turned to the bushy-haired girl and smiled. See you at the Burrow, Mione. She rushed over and hugged me, saying good luck with the Muggles. I laughed but nevertheless nodded and said goodbye again. Potter, over here now, my uncle called. I rolled my eyes but still slowly walked over, muttering about how unfair it was under my breath. It was nice that Killian had stopped them calling me freak and boy, but that didn't mean I liked it when they practically spat my surname. Yes, Vernon. I refused to call him uncle. He doesn't deserve it. Remus and Sirius do. Sheep. It was already about 1 week away from 4th year, and today I was going to the Burrow. I had installed the Floo system in my trunk, which had walk-in compartments that were magically expanded. For instance, I had a walk-in wardrobe, a dueling room, a small apartment area with a kitchen and bed, and then I had a potions lab. Ebony loved to sleep in there whilst I was in lessons. Cosmos had a golden perch in there too. It was also nice not falling on my face when I called out the Burrow. Instead, I gracefully stepped out and swept off the excess soot. Harrison, Ron said excitedly. I smiled and gave him a sort of man hug. Ginny was still pretty infatuated with me, so she still blushed and stuttered, but nowhere near as bad as she used to. Hermione here yet, Ron? No, she will be here tomorrow, he replied. I nodded my head, and he led me into the kitchen where Molly was cooking and Arthur was reading the Daily Prophet. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. Please, Harrison, Molly and Arthur will do. Your family now being friends with my boys and saving my daughter's life. I couldn't keep the smile off my face, but at least this time I didn't cry like I did last time. That's not canon, but shush.
Ok, Molly.
Well, as I said, it's lovely to see you again. You too, Harrison. Although I do get many angry letters from Minerva about all the pranks you and my youngest son get up to. I suppose I wouldn't get away with only having the twins as pranksters. But here we are, I replied cheekily, causing he to swat my arm. Ron took me upstairs to the twins' room so we could all plan pranks. After a while, Ginny joined us and helped us out. Sheep, I'm gonna skip most of 4th year as I really dislike it. Especially the movie and how it ruined the book. No hate to JK, obviously it was just a tad too long. Hermione arrived the next day and she spent the night with us until the next day when we would be leaving. Like last time, we met Cedric and his father in the woods and then took a portkey. I was so happy that I actually knew what to do this time and not stand around like a twit. It was so embarrassing last time. It was also nice that Cedric's father couldn't float about how Ced was the better flyer as he didn't fall off his broom. What's that? Hermione asked. I smirked inwardly. That was me last time. The support key. I told her, inwardly jumping for joy that I wasn't the naive one. Oh, I've read all about them, she said excitedly. We all snorted, knowing just how true that is. One by one we all got onto our knees and held onto the shoe. When it whisked us away, after feeling the familiar jerk behind the navel. When my feet slammed into the floor, I didn't even stumble as I was so used to it. Neither did Arthur, Cedric, or Amos. All the others fell flat on either their asses or faces. I walked over to Hermione, while Cedric went to Ginny, and we helped them up. They all looked very embarrassed about having fallen over, and they all scowled at us for staying up. Is there anything this prick is not good at? Ron grumbled good-naturedly. I just chuckled and said, yes, most likely. He rolled his eyes but still snorted. You even did it ridiculously graceful as always. At least the other three who stayed upright looked very windswept. You, on the other hand, looked as if you just walked off the bloody model runway. Hermione muttered, much to my amusement. Ah, well, he has always, George began. Been very graceful, Fred continued. Even more than George, continued on. Lucius Malfoy. Fred finished. They all chuckled as I rolled my eyes, muttering about albino peacocks. That got them roaring with laughter. We all made our way over to our tent after saying goodbye to the Diggories. Sheep. It went the same as last time, with Crumb catching the snitch but Ireland still winning the game. I found the Velas didn't have an effect on me at all, which Beauty snorted and told me it was because I was blessed by Beauty herself. Killian added it was most likely because of how strong my occlumency shields were, which Beauty glared at him for. Ron and the twins were drooling whilst the other Weasleys were covering their ears and closing their eyes so they wouldn't feel the allure. The girls were very happy that I just sat there with my hands behind my head, looking very relaxed and not at all drooling over the girls. Hermione suggested that I was maybe gay, but I told her I was bisexual. Nobody was surprised as I flirted with boys and girls openly. Although I did keep my humility intact and didn't just flirt with those who were taken. That would just be rude. I said it was most likely my strong will and shields, which they accepted. And like last time, the Death Eaters attacked, against Moldyvoldy's orders. But this time I didn't get caught in the crowds. I actually helped the Ministry with stunning the Death Eaters. I actually managed to catch 3 of them who were shipped off to a trial. They were only minor ones, as the main ones were still in Azkaban. I was sort of looking forward to being able to duel Bellatrix once again and Peter. I knew they'd stand no chance against me when I was literally immortal and had death and life's magic running through me. My core was triple what it used to be, and my core used to be about double the normal average wizard. Still not as big as Dumbledore's, but large enough. Now it was like twice the size of Dumbledore's, which amazed me. As I was with the Ministry rounding up Death Eaters, I didn't get accused of shooting the dark mark into the sky. If you're wondering how the trace didn't affect my wand, I removed it, and even if I didn't, A, it was a life-threatening situation, and B, there were so many adult wizards around, the trace wouldn't have been able to detect it was me. The Ministry workers definitely didn't mind, as I had captured more than they had. Most of them hadn't been able to capture anyone, and they all got away, but a few got 1 or 2. It was also nice not having Hermione have to explain exactly what the dark mark was. I decided that I would pretend to find the Ravenclaw Diadem Horcrux this year, and give it to Dumbledore, who now knows he can get a soul purge from Gringotts. I was rather surprised back in 2nd year when I found out he had no idea you could do that. And like last time, the Triwizard Tournament was announced. I knew I had selected this time again, so I didn't tell Dumbledore about the imposter Moody, but I did make a vow in front of the entire hall that I didn't enter. Luckily, the Slytherins didn't make the badges this time round, as everyone was still supporting me. Cedric and I became good friends once more, and even Crumb and Fleur were very pleasant. I was happy Ron didn't abandon me this time, as I hated being without my best friend. I was still insecure that he would ditch me one day, but deep down I knew he would always be there for me. As with the twins, Neville, Hermione, and Luna, who I met in my 2nd year and became fast friends with after I stopped her getting Builder. We often fed the Thestrals together. As she was a seer, she would have knew the truth, but fate blocked her mind of it, as they couldn't have anyone knowing I was reborn. I pouted at them and whined, but they said no still. So instead I just told Luna it was my mother's death I saw, which was true. The first task was much the same, except instead of flying I used Parseltongue and spoke to the dragon. I even brought sausages along and asked if she could cook them with her fire. Her name was Rosemary. Everyone was laughing hysterically at the image of the boy who lived having a barbecue with the Hungarian horntail. The dragon trainers were speechless at how calm she was being and asked me to calm the others after the task. She literally threw the egg to me and all the judges gave me an 8 except Kakarov who gave a measly 5. I didn't give one as I wasn't in it to win it, even though I had to, otherwise the others would get murdered by Wormtail. Call me insane, but I was super excited to duel Voldemort and taunt him some more, knowing I could definitely beat him, obviously with some difficulty, but it was much more possible than last time. The second task was the same, except I didn't have to save Gabrielle this time, as I knew the mare people would actually bring her up when the time was over if Fleur didn't reach her. So I came first this time. Then finally the third task for next chapter, Chapter 25, Harrison's POV. I was running through the maze using a point me spell to get there faster, but then I realized that I'd have to save Cedric as Victor had been imperiorized. I ran down between the hedges, even using Fiendfire to burn holes in the middle of them as nobody said you couldn't. When I finally found them, they were locked in a heated duel. I stunned Crumb. He was bewitched, I said frantically. Are you sure, Haza? He clearly wasn't convinced. Also yes, Haza is a nickname, granted normally used for Harry, but shut it. Yes, said, his eyes were glazed over. Now help me find Fleur by using a point me spell. I heard her screaming a minute ago. He looked slightly sick at this point, but nodded nonetheless. I told him to go the way I knew Fleur was, as to buy me more time to reach the cup before him. I didn't want him to die. So it was selfish and selfless. I ran towards where I knew the cup lay. I heard the red sparks shoot up into the air, indicating Fleur had been found. I took a deep breath and took the cup, feeling the hook behind my navel. Just like before, I found myself standing in the graveyard in Little Hagton, or whatever it's called, in front of a massive cauldron. I heard Peter step out of the shadows. My scar didn't hurt at all, as the Horcrux had been removed. I pointed my wand at him and said, Peter. He jumped in fright, almost dropping the ugly baby-like monster. Put me in the cauldron now, Voldemort ordered. Yais, my lord, Peter squeaked. I shot a blasting hex at the floor in front of his feet, sending Peter flying. But unluckily for me, there was somebody else there. Barty Crouch Jr. What I thought he was still impersonating Mad Eye. Yes, that would be Chow's doing, young master. He knew you would easily defeat Peter in a duel, so he summoned one of the powerful Inner Circle members. Fucking Chaos, no you're not. I growled in aggravation at both Chaos and Barty. I was too late to dodge the bone-breaking hex that he sent at my leg. I held in the cry of pain that was trying to erupt from my throat, and instead turned to the straw-colored haired man with blazing eyes. He did his creepy nervous tick, licking his lips excessively, and levitated me onto the gravestone of Thomas Marvolo Riddle Sr., bloody Voldemort's father. He cut off Peter's hand, who did it willingly like last time but clearly not happy about it. Then turned to me and took my blood. I managed to kick him in the balls, wincing while doing it as I knew it was bound to have hurt. He bowled out in pain but still kept my blood on the tip of his knife. Voldemort had risen once more. Sheep, after his very long and dramatic speech at his Death Eaters, with me eating a sandwich I had wandlessly conjured, he finally turned to me. Harrison P. He stopped after seeing me happily munching away on a ham sandwich. I would never get the image of his face out of my head. It was hilarious. He actually gaped at me and spluttered. Yes, moldy shorts, I said cheerfully. He scowled at my mocking whilst the others shouted in outrage at the blatant rudeness. No, Matt, my loyal friends, I snorted, making him turn back to me. What, he roared. I merely raised an eyebrow as my eye twitched in annoyance at his theatrics. Yes, because they're all so loyal. You literally had your Death Eaters selling each other out at the end of the last Wizarding War. Then you had dear old Lucius give away your precious diary from when you were 16. Which I may add makes you sound like a girl. I suppose I can understand the temper tantrums that you throw. I said casually, as if it wasn't the most feared Dark Lord of all time in front of me. The Death Eater's jaws were slacked and mouths open comically wide at the sheer audacity of my behavior. Crucio, he shouted, our fury burning through his scarlet eyes. It hurt like fuck. Way worse than when he was in Quirrell's body, but that was because he was living of a weak wizard's core and soul. But me, being the stubborn teen I am, refused to show even a hint of pain and continued to feast on my sandwich. Much to the deity's amusement, except life and fate, as they were scolding me for my cheekiness. Remember, peeps, I'm immortal until I choose to go on to the afterlife. Basically, if I get killed, I will go to Death's office and he will bring me back. By the way, at this point he was already let down by Voldy. Sheep, stop eating that sandwich, Harrison Potter. Yes, mother, I don't want to get a stomach ache, I said haughtily whilst rolling my eyes. The Death Eaters all looked like they were either going to curse me into the ground or about to have a heart attack. Let's have a duel, he announced suddenly. I merely nodded and got into a stance, as did he. Avada Kedavra, he shouted. Instead of using Expelliarmus, I ducked and rolled to the left. I then stood, and as I caught him off guess as he expected me to try and disarm him, I was able to blast him backwards into his little pet Death Eaters. Crucio, this one managed to hit me, but I stood up still, gritting my teeth in effort not to cry out. If you saw my face, you would think it was just a slight tickle I could feel, but really it felt as if every nerve was on fire. Obviously, in his arrogance, he thought that under the curse I wouldn't be able to retaliate. Bombarda had hit the headstone behind him, causing it to explode and send debris flying towards them all. He and a few more skilled Death Eaters put up a shield, but some had zero time and instead got knocked out. Avada Kedavra, he tried again. It almost hit me in the chest and would have done, had I not conjured a block of pure gold to deflect it away from me. He clearly was surprised a fourth year was able to conjure something, let alone deflect the killing curse. I took that moment to silently disarm him. His wand landed in my hand and I ran. I bolted as fast as I could back to the cup. Just as a cruciatus gut my chest, I grabbed the cup. I still got hit by it, but I had managed to get the port key. Cheers went up as I returned to the arena, the other 3 champions clapping too. Dumbledore came over, clearly seeing just how badly I was twitching and all the blood gushing out of my arm. Harrison, are you all right? He asked me calmly. I shook my head and said, Can we talk in your office, sir? I had somehow managed not even stutter, even when my entire body was racking in shakes from the after effects of the torture curse. He nodded and helped me up, telling everyone we would be back soon. Clearly everyone thought everything was fine as they all ran back to the castle, practically partying the whole way. I nodded at my friends who also left. This time I wasn't dragged away by Barty and instead went straight to Dumbledore. Fudge followed us too. When we entered his office, he asked us both to sit. My dear boy, why do you look as if you have been held under the torture curse? Because I have, I replied bluntly. The minister and headmaster paled and whipped their heads towards me. What? Voldemort has risen again. Impossible, you're lying, the minister boomed. Dumbledore, on the other hand, looked his age for once, his full 113. I have his wand right here, sir, I told him. They both nodded for me to show them. They both gasped when I pulled out the infamous bone-white Ewd wand, the twin brother to my previous one. How can we be sure you haven't transfigured it? Fudge said, although he seemed rather convinced, unlike last time. I, Harrison James Denver Potter, swear on my life, soul and magic that Lord Voldemort has returned to power. I did a lumos to show I still had my magic. Cornelius shook with dread, now knowing what I said was the truth. I'm sorry, Mr. Potter. I was too afraid to believe it. He apologized. I waved it off. Worry not, sir. I understand. I must get this printed in the Daily Prophet immediately, warning everyone that the Second Wizarding War has begun. He left, and with that me and the aged headmaster let it sink in. The Second Wizarding War had truly begun. End of chapter. B. Chapter 26. Harrison's POV. So, headmaster, are you going to reassemble the Order of the Phoenix? He was obviously shocked I knew about it, as he asked me how on earth I knew about it. I remember Mum and Dad speaking about it when I was young. You see, sir, I have an eidetic memory. Oh, right, sorry, Harrison, I didn't realize. And yes, we will reassemble the Order. You will be brought to the headquarters in your last week of the summer holidays, he told me. I nodded and parted ways. I walked back to my friends who were partying in the Gryffindor Tower. Harrison, Ron shouted. Yeah. Come on, the older years brought the fire whiskey out. I laughed but still ran over to get drunk. I mean, I am 14, who wouldn't? Plus I definitely need and deserve it with stupid Snakeface coming back to power, even if he doesn't have a wand. Yes, young master, he isn't particularly happy with the fact he is without a wand. Lee.
JFY.
For fuck's sake, why can't he just leave everyone alone? It's safe to say I got very drunk that night and woke up completely fine, as I was so used to getting piss-faced drunk after the war. Although I did feel a little bit weird, as I hadn't gotten that drunk in about 15 years. Sheep. It was printed all around the world that the Dark Lord had returned to power once more. Unlike last time, the entire world didn't believe I was a lying scumbag. They were all actually preparing for war. Many Muggleborns were going into hiding until they left for school, mostly under the Fidelis. I still had to live with the dreaded Muggles while Sirius was in St. Mungo's, but he finally got out a week before I left to Grimmauld Place. He had to make sure it was habitual for everyone to go there for the order. Sheep. Finally, it was the day I was to leave the bloody Muggles. I spent the day packing everything I needed to take with me, allowing Cosmos to fly. I had Ebony in my case, as I knew she wouldn't appreciate flying. Why we didn't just apparate was beyond me. It would save much hassle and time. But nope, the order still made us fly. But I suppose Dumbledore may have put anti-apparition wards around the house, so if the Death Eaters ever got past the blood wards, no more could apparate out or in. I was currently waiting on my bed for Tonks, Moody, Kingsley, and Daedalus. Pretty sure I spelt it wrong, faced with tears of joy. I know there were more members that night, but shush. After roughly 26 minutes, they arrived. I could tell as I heard Tonks tripping you the stairs. I stood up and leant against the wall, waiting for them to enter. I was fiddling with my wand, this time not absolutely terrified as to who they were. Potter. Came a gruff voice I knew to be Moody's. Moody, I greeted. Got all your stuff? I nodded and told them I'd shrunk it down. Wait, how did you do that if you have the trace on your wand? Kingsley asked. Wandlessly, of course, I told him cheerfully. They all looked shocked but accepted it, as it was the only possible way I could have done it without a wand. We all got outside and onto our broom. Moody was leading us. Tonks and Daedalus were either side of me and Kingsley behind me. Me and Tonks had a mini race over the river, which I thrashed her at on my firebolt. Sirius still got me the broom as my Nimbus smashed to pieces in the Quidditch accident. When we arrived, I had to pretend I couldn't already see the house. When we entered, like last time, I was tackled into a hug by Hermione and Ron. The former much more forceful and tight. The latter a more manly bro hug. Hey Harrison, it's good to see you again, mate. Ron said happily. You too, guys. I replied, equally as cheerful. Then I turned my head to where I knew the Order members were having a meeting and caught sight of Sirius and Remus like last time. I have them a short smile and nod before heading upstairs before Molly could tell us off. When the twins asked us if we wanted to spy on them, I was ecstatic, as we didn't need the extendable ears. I could shadow walk us into the dining room and blend in with the shadows. I told them all about it, but warned them it's not very pleasant the first time and that they had to keep quiet, even if they were unable to see us. Killian informed me that not even Alistair Moody's eye would be able to see us, nor would anyone be able to sense us unless we alerted them to our position. Ready? They all nodded. I shadowed us all to the corner of the room, making sure I didn't accidentally push them out of the shadows. They all had to be holding me, even if it was on gripping my shirt, to be able to stay hidden. This time we were actually able to listen to the entire meeting and learn about the prophecy. When it was over, before Molly could call us downstairs, I took everyone back up. What did the prophecy say, do you reckon? Fred asked. I already know. I overheard my mother talking about it to Dad when I was a baby. They all looked really confused, so I explained about my ability to recall every memory from when I was born. Can you tell us the prophecy? Hermione asked hopefully. I shook my head. I'm sorry, but I can't. You have to be able to shield your mind from a full-blown legilimency attack, and as of yet none of you that I'm aware of are able to occlude your minds. No, none of us are able to. That's a shame. Ron said solemnly. Never mind, at least we can spy on them every meeting. I said mischievously. They all gained equally mischievous grins and nodded. Still can't believe Snavelis is a member, George said whilst laughing. He's a double agent, you know. They all didn't even look surprised, knowing very well he was also a Death Eater. Whose side is he on? Hermione asked. His own time, be honest. But if I had to pick, then I'd say Dumbledore's. I told her. They all nodded in understanding, and finally Molly called us down. When we got downstairs, Tonks was also in the hallway, clearly waiting for us as well. She tripped over the coat hanger which set of Walburga Black's portrait. Filthy half-blood. Just before anyone could retort anything, I flicked my wrist and closed the curtains wandlessly and wordlessly. Thank Merlin for silencing charms. I muttered quite loudly, much to everyone's amusement. Was that wandless magic Harrison? I looked up and saw the twins' shocked faces. Yeah, how do you think I get away with loads of pranks before a teacher can stop them? They all just snorted, knowing how many times pranks had been set off without anyone doing anything at all. It all makes so much more sense. Fred laughed. We all went into the dining room where the rest of the order were leaving, except Moody, Tonks, and Kingsley. And obviously Sirius, Remus, and the Weasleys. Hey pup, Sirius said excitedly. I turned to him with a big smile on my face and almost bolted to him. I somehow managed to restrain myself and instead, I calming said, Hey Siri. He held his arms out for me to hug him and I bounded over there with a bounce in my step. He wrapped his arms around my waist as I did the same to him. It was quite funny for me as I was actually taller than him. I had grown to 6'1". Still an inch shorter than Remy but 1 inch taller. That's Siri. Good to see you again, puppy. You too. We came apart and sat down. Sirius at the head of the table at the right end, me on his left and Remus on his right. Next to Remus it went Ron, then a gap, Tonks, Kingsley, and then Arthur at the other end. On Arthur's right there was Molly, Ginny, Fred, George, Hermione, and then me. Moody was standing against the wall behind Sirius. As we were finishing dinner, Sirius finally began to talk about the weapon that Moldy Shorts didn't have last time. And like last time, Moody warned him not to say any more, and before Molly could interrupt Sirius, who being him blatantly ignored Moody, and tell him I was just a boy, I spoke up. The prophecy, I know all about it already, don't worry yourself silly about protecting it. They all whipped their heads around to look at me in shock. What spluttered Molly. I merely chuckled charmingly, causing Ginny and the other teens to blush bright red. Well, you know, when one tries to hide something from myself, I will always find out what they are hiding, you know. They all still looked confused, so I rolled my eyes and told them the lie that I told the others. I told them that they could break the prophecy as I already knew it. Well, that solves a problem, I'll say. Kingsley said. I nodded. I really wish Dumbledore wouldn't try to hide things from me and Molly. I do appreciate your worry, but I'm not just a child. I had to grow up quicker than most. Surely you understand that I can handle it. I raised a perfectly sculptured eyebrow at her. Sorry dear, it's just you're so young still. You shouldn't have to deal with all this pressure. It's fine, Molly. I have all you lot with me. Takes a lot of the pressure off, you know, I said cheerfully, waving away their worries. I had long realized I did need them and that I wouldn't be able to stop them from protecting me. Especially Sirius, Remus, and the Weasleys. Also Hermione and Neville. Obviously I would probably be protecting them most of the time with my raw power that I received from the deities, but I would still need their help. Hey Killian. Yes, little one. For Merlin's sake, Killian, I'm not little. To me you are. Yes, because you're an old man. Anyway, how many Death Eaters do you reckon I'd be able to take down in a duel at once? About 58, young master. Well, that's a lot. Yes, but if it wasn't a duel and you merely let your magic out like Voldemort did in your 5th year and it made Dumbledore fall over, you could easily take out the entire order and at least 20-odd Death Eaters. Why would I take out the order? You wouldn't mean to, obviously, but they wouldn't be able to withstand your mass amount of raw power that you hold. Would it hurt them? No, but it would either knock them out completely or force them to their knees, depending how strong they are. And I don't mean magically, I mean physically, as they have to fight against a massive force. So you'd send Dumbledore flying, but Remus would probably just fall to his knees with his added strength. Merlin, that would be pretty funny, sending Dumbledore flying. I mentally clocked him in the head and left my mindscape. And with that, we all left for bed. End of chapter. Brooke, chapter 27. Third POV. In the morning, they all woke up and headed down to breakfast. Kingsley, Tonks, and Moody has all gone home, leaving the Weasleys, Hermione, Harrison, Remus, and Sirius. Today they were going to look at Harrison's memories so far as Remus and Sirius has missed a lot. Also the others had only heard about most of it but not seen it. They all ate their food and headed to the front room where the pensieve was. This is what happened with the Philosopher's Stone. He extracted the memory and put the swirling white strand into the basin of the pensieve. They all entered one by one and landed in the 3rd floor corridor. Somebody's already been here. Fluffy's asleep. said a younger Ron. Yeah, well, observed Carrot Head. Memory Harrison said. Everyone laughed at Harrison's sarcasm and Ron's super offended face. But all looked very shaken when they saw the three-headed dog. Why on earth is there a Cerberus in Hogwarts? Remus and Molly asked at the same time. Dumbledore, Harrison sighed. Harrison, Ronald, Hermione, and Neville all entered the trapdoor. The memory 11-year-olds, except Harrison, who has always looked as if he'd been there and done it 100 times, much to the others' annoyance. It's only devil's snare, you lot, just start a fire, young Harrison said cheerfully, as if they weren't all currently being strangled by the thick vines. Honestly, Harrison, do you ever panic or make mistakes? Ginny asked, exasperated. I'm sure there are plenty of things that we haven't yet discovered, he said. There's no firewood. Harrison, how are we meant to make a fire? Memory Hermione said. Are you a witch or not? Young Ron said, half terrified, half annoyed. Hermione blushed bright red at the memory, whilst everyone had a right laugh at her. There no firewood. Sirius howled with laughter. All the others were chuckling just as hard. Hermione cuffed Harrison on the back of the head. I hate you, Haza. No, you don't, and be careful, Mione, that might end up being the last ever thing you say to me if I die, Harrison said mock sadly. Harrison, James, Denver, Potter, do not say things like that, Hermione, Ginny, and Molly said all at the same time. The others all looked horrified at the thought of him being dead. They all watched the flying keys, then the chessboard, and were all fascinated with the shadow walking, but winced when Hermione exploded the chess pieces, especially when the debris hit them, mostly Harrison. Ouch. How did you all stay conscious after that, especially Haza? George said whilst grimacing. Not quite sure, to be honest. Ron scratched the back of his head, whilst Molly seemed to be checking them all over for injuries even when it was years ago. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. They all watched in disgust when they saw the troll passed out on the floor, and laughed when Harrison didn't even bother reading the riddle and instead shadowed them all right through. When they all saw Quirrell, they were all bewildered. None of them had any idea why he was there, except surprise, surprise. Harrison, bloody Potter. And obviously the older versions of the memory people. They all gasped when Hermione, Ron and Neville got bound up with robes but sighed with relief when Harrison dodged them. Everyone either shrieked in horror when they saw Voldemort or paled significantly. They watched Harrison duel and taunt Voldemort. Come on, moldy shorts. Harrison, don't taunt him, Hermione yelled. Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. When Voldemort shot a Cruciatus at the memory Hermione, they all shouted, No, Hermione, even though she couldn't hear them. But when Harrison jumped in front of it, they all gasped. They choked back a sob when they saw him bravely hide the pain he was in and continue to protect his friends. Oh, Merlin. Harrison, you took an unforgivable for them. Arthur shuddered. Harrison merely smiled sadly. Harrison hugged Hermione, who was bawling her eyes out at the memory. Seems you're losing your touch. Harrison, how can you still talk whilst under that horrid curse? Fred asked gobsmacked. He merely smirked and shook his head. They all continued to watch the duel, although they were all growing deeply concerned over how long Harrison had been held under the torture curse, especially at such a young age. They were also wondering how he wasn't screaming his lungs out. When Harrison punched Voldy in the jaw, they all spluttered and their eyes bulged out their heads. Merlin, Haza, Fred roared with laughter. You actually punched the flipping Dark Lord George. Finished. Yeah. Harrison said, slightly sheepish, but you could see the absolute glee shining through his eyes. Remus and Sirius were pale at the sight of Harrison and Voldemort dueling, but were laughing when the most feared man of all time was knocked out cold by an 11-year-old boy. When they saw his extensive injuries, Remus Wolf came out and his eyes bled amber. He sniffed and checked his cub all over even though it was in his first year. Finally they were finished with the first-year memory, and the first thing they did was hug Ron, Harrison, and Hermione. Pup, I can't believe you punched Voldemort in the face, Sirius wheezed. I know, I was so proud of myself back then. Harrison replied gleefully. Remus and Molly were still horror-struck over the injuries and were checking all three children over. I'm glad you three and poor Neville are all fine now, Arthur said honestly. The others nodded in agreement. Well, let's get into second year, the twins chorused. And so they looked at the dueling club with Lockhart and all the pranks they did. Obviously Harrison didn't show them him making friends with the Basilisk or anything about the Chamber of Secrets, nor the Horcrux. Also Harrison and Dumbledore had so far destroyed the diary, the Diadem, the ring which Harrison told Dumbledore not to put on, telling him he was a seer and could see it would curse him, and the locket. Harrison had shown Dumbledore the locker after the Order meeting, when nobody was looking. Obviously he had to bribe Kreacher, but in the end Kreacher was very happy to be able to destroy Regulus' locket, which was Regulus' last order before he died, defying Voldemort before he was even 20 years old. Third Year Memories is next chapter. B. Chapter 28. Harrison's POV. We all went back into the pensive one by one in order to replay my third year. I decided to start at the first Daedal lesson with Moony. Today we are doing Boggarts. Memory, Remus said, after Hermione explained what it was. All the students went wide-eyed and pale, clearly not wanting to face their fears. Neville went up first and Snape came out the wardrobe. Snivellus. I'm not surprised he's scared of him. Look at him. He looks like an overgrown vampire or bat, Sirius said. I just smirked, knowing what happened next. Ridiculous. Snape turned from wearing his normal billowing black robes into women's clothing. He wore a dark green dress, high heels, and a vulture hat. Everyone was in hysterics, laughing at the Snape Boggart's misfortune, especially Sirius and I. The twins, Ron and Ginny, were also snickering. Hermione and Remus were smiling and Molly and Arthur were trying not to laugh. Wow, Neville the Vulture was a nice touch, Memory Me said. Then finally it was my turn. Memory Me stepped up to the front of the line. Everyone around was whispering about you-know-who. I stood in front of the boggart that was currently a jacinth box. It suddenly flew back into the cupboard with a scream, terrified as it hadn't managed to scare me. What happened? Fred asked, confused. Harrison doesn't have a boggart. Ron replied. What I though that was impossible, you must be afraid of something, George said. Nope, I said, popping the pea. The memories carried on, with me meeting Moony every now and then finally Sirius broke into Gryffindor Tower. Well, oops, Sirius said very sheepishly, whilst everyone else glared at him for his dramatics. Oops, you say, Remus said, fondly staring at his husband. Yes, they got married back before Azkaban when they were 18. Once more, the memories carried on, and it showed the fat lady being ripped to shreds, the students all sleeping in the hall and the classes. It also showed Harrison and his friends pranking the teachers, driving them up the wall. Well, everyone, if you don't like blood, I would suggest stepping out, for it's about to look like a horror movie, I said just before the whole thing with the Shrieking Shack happens. Well, I don't think anybody here loves blood, Harrison, but we all want to see what happened. I didn't get to see it all as I transformed into that monster. Remus said. He mumbled the last bit though. I slung my arm around his shoulders to show him we don't mind, he's a werewolf. Oh, honestly, Remus, don't be such a drama queen. You fold your socks. Do forgive me if I'm not trembling at the sight of you, I said exasperatedly, not knowing my father had said the exact same thing, word for word. Your father said the same thing, little one. Really? Well, it's true, that it is. Everyone except Remus were laughing. Sirius had a distant look in eyes. Clearly remember the time my dad, James, said it. But he was still chuckling loudly. You know, Prong said the exact same thing in school, Sirius laughed. I pretended to look shocked. Really? Remus and Sirius nodded. I just laughed and said, well, it is true, you do fold your socks. That just seemed to set the two off again. I was becoming bewildered now. Cub, that's exactly what Sirius said after James. He wheezed. Oh, well, it's true still, I said in realization. Yes, it is, pup. Sirius laughed. Anyway, back to my memories. Scabbers has just bit Ron, and he was about to run after him when Memory Me said I'd do it. Younger me ran halfway down the hill, where I managed to catch the rat. Look out, Harrison, Ron shouted. Memory Me looked up and saw the massive dog, but it was too late to dodge or shoot a spell at it. Padfoot pushed me hard to the floor, taking me down by the chest. As if fell back, some of my ribs snapped, making a cracking noise, causing Padfoot to let out a slight whine. Holy Merlin, Sirius, you snapped the poor boy's bones, Molly said, frantically checking me over. Molly, I'm fine now, although I do agree that he shouldn't have tackled me to the floor, I said, the last bit glaring at Sirius, who was looking slightly sheepishly. Sorry, pup, he said, looking at the floor. Hey, it's fine, nobody died, I said cheerfully, smiling to get rid of any tension. Padfoot continued to drag Memory Me down the hill, me getting covered in cuts and bruises, saying a lot of oofs and ouchs. Finally, he dragged me under the tree, where I landed on the hard floor, the metal rod from the support system impaling my chest. all 6 inches stabbing me. I winced and grabbed my chest where the metal rod had come out, causing a fast flow of blood to gush out. "Oh Merlin, Harrison, how did you only wince?" Ginny cried out. "High pain tolerance," I said simply. "Pup to him, sorry. I didn't mean to," Sirius said in horror. I waved off his apology, already having forgiven him long ago. We all continued to watch, most of us knowing what happened in the shack already. But nobody had told Molly and Arthur about the stair mishap. So when Peter tackled me down the stairs, Molly almost had a heart attack and Arthur's eyes were blazing with anger at Peter. Everyone who was there, or had been told about it, still cried out when it happened, either forgetting how bad it had actually been or not realizing how bad it was in the first place. "How are you even alive?" Fred said, perplexed. "I have no idea myself."
Elite.
Memory Me told Remus it was the full moon and that we should leave. Sirius slung my arm over his shoulder and Ron did my other arm on his. They practically carried me out as my feet ended up just dragging on the floor when I kept passing out. Finally we got outside and Sirius stopped the blood flow coming out of my chest, but I continued to cough up blood. "Internal bleeding, that means," Remus said whilst grimacing. Just before I passed out they saw Snape come around the corner, wand drawn. Then the memory ended. We were all sent back out. As soon as we were, Sirius sent me an apologetic look. I went over and hugged him to show there were no hard feelings. "How are you still alive after that puppy?" he mumbled, slightly muffled as his head was pressed against my neck and mine against his.
"Ibe no idea, just Lucky suposa."
"Well, should we go on to 4th year?" he whispered. I nodded and we drew apart. I took out yet another white strand and placed it in the pensive. We all went in and the memory began to play. I had only put in the 3rd task as the rest wasn't very important. Although they all laughed loudly when they heard I literally had a barbecue with the dragon. I was running through the maze using a point me spell to find the cup, coming across Cedric and Crumb on the way. "He is under the Imperius curse, Cedric." I told him to help me find Fleur as I had heard her screams and pretended to run to her, when actually I looked for the cup. Of course, as they didn't know what I was thinking, they just thought I was looking for Fleur and the cup. I eventually came across the cup, took a deep breath and took it. It was a port key and took me to the graveyard. I landed on my feet gracefully. "What, the cup was a port key? Why are you in a graveyard?" Harrison Molly asked, confused. "Although that was a very graceful landing," Fred laughed. "You'll see. And thanks, Fred." I winked. When Peter came out, Remus growled and held me close. Sirius watched Memory Me closely, making sure Peter didn't touch a hair on my head. It's safe to say they weren't surprised when I blasted him backwards, but all very pleased. "Well done, Harrison," Sirius said with a savage grin. "Thanks, Padfoot." When I was tied up by another person, they all gasped when they saw Barty Crouch Jr. as he was believed to be dead. "Sheep!" They were all absolutely horrified when Voldemort rose again. They couldn't stop gawking at him with huge eyes. The girls were clutching each other in fear and the boys were pale and shaking. After he summoned his followers to the graveyard, he spoke his long speech. I was just as bored as last time and wished I could be eating a sandwich like my younger counterpart. Nobody had realized what I was doing as they were too busy goggling at the Dark Lord. When he finally turned to me and began to splutter, they all looked at what could possibly get the composed Dark Lord so flustered. "What, put that sandwich down, Harrison Potter," he screamed like a naughty baby. Everyone was too shocked at my audacity to eat a sandwich in front of him, as if he weren't there at all. Eventually the twins began to snicker and snort. Ginny followed them by practically gasping for air and Hermione just as bad. Ron began to roar with laughter, alongside his dad. Molly, it seemed, didn't know what to think, so she settled for a mouth-hanging open look. Remus and Sirius were doubled over in laughter. "Harrison, you literally sat there and ate a fucking sandwich," Ron laughed. Molly cuffed him on the back of the head and glared at him for his profanity. They were all clutching each other when I was under the torture curse and in awe when I didn't let any pain display on my face. When it got to me and him dueling, I don't think they were expecting me to disarm him, as we all stood in silence for about 10 minutes when we were spat out of the memory. Eventually Remus, in full protective mode, eyes amber and inhuman growls slipping out. He held me tightly against his chest. Everyone except Sirius left the room so we could have privacy. Sirius was fine to be around Moony as they were mates. Remus had one hand on my back and one tangled in my unruly black hair, running his hand as to soothe me and himself. Sirius came over and put on hand on his mate's shoulder and one on mine. They both placed a kiss on top of my head and we stood there in silence for a bit. Finally, after a few minutes, we pulled apart, but they refused to take one of their hands off my shoulders. Remus' eyes were slowly going back to their normal warm chocolate brown. He had stopped growling as soon as everyone left. "Cub, you never said it was that bad. It wasn't really Uncle Mooney," I mumbled. It stopped them for a minute as I rarely called them uncle like I used to. "Yes, it was Cub, he tortured you, baby." I blushed bright red and said, "Mooney, I'm not a baby." Sirius snorted and said, "Look, Rem, we have finally managed to embarrass him." Remus had a big smile on his face, although his eyes still had a glint of worry in them. "You'll always be our baby cub. James and Lily would have been even worse than us, and you know it." Explicit part removed for guideline compliance. The next chapter will be the boggart scene with Molly. I know that would have happened already by now, but go with it. Chapter 29. Harrison's POV. We were all cleaning up the house today, and I couldn't feel as if I'd forgotten about an event that happened last time. Molly was upstairs, Arthur and Sirius were cleaning the kitchen, Remus and Hermione and Ron were cleaning the front room. Ginny and I were cleaning the hallways on the bottom floor, whilst the twins were doing the middle floor. It's a townhouse, so it has 3 floors. Suddenly there was a crash and someone sobbing from upstairs. I told Ginny I'd deal with it and ran up the stairs. Clearly Remus had told the others to also wait downstairs as none of the other teens were rushing upstairs. I was bewildered, not remembering if this happened last time. Finally I got to the door where I could hear the sobbing behind and opened the door. I could see Molly curled up in the corner of the room crying. "Oh, Merlin the boggart." I turned to my right where I knew my own corpse would lay. There I was. Me in the form of a boggart was lying on the floor, eyes open but dead and glazed, chest not rising and pale skin. The skin would be icy cold if someone were to touch me. Blood pooling out from my head. There was no mistake, it was my own dead form. "Merlin, it's awful," said fate. I stood up in front of my own dead body and waited for the boggart to change. After about 3 seconds it screamed and flew back into the drawer where it came from. I turned back to Molly and crouched down in front of her. "Hey Molly, it was only a boggart. I promise all your children are fine. You can flu Bill and Charlie if you want, and the others are all downstairs. Arthur is fine too, as am I." I soothed her. I put my arms around my waist and she latched onto me, crying on my shoulder. Last time it was Remus who vanished the boggart and calmed Molly, but this time I vowed to be braver and stronger, to protect them to the best of my ability until I was ready to pass on to the afterlife. I knew Arthur, Remus and Sirius had seen the boggart form of my dead body, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get rid of Sirius that easily. He would probably be rather clingy, like a toddler to their parents. But I know it's because he had spent 12 years being forced to remember the sight of his dead best friend's body. I still looked very similar to my dad, but I no longer wore glasses and am not lanky like he was. Also, I have emerald eyes like my mother's, whilst his are a warm hazel. So to Sirius, he probably wouldn't see dead James, but dead me. In the books and movies, I think we can all agree that Sirius did love Harry to pieces, but he did sort of see him as James only. Remember, he never went to the mind healers like in my story and was never free. Now he can roam the streets whenever. In my story, he doesn't see Harry Harrison as James' replacement, but as Harrison himself. So in this book, Sirius Boggart would be Remus and Harrison's dead body. Back to the story. Eventually she calmed down and started sprouting off apologies, but I brushed them off.
"I'm sorry, Harrison."
"You must think I'm so silly," she smiled falsely. I frowned and shook my head. "No, Molly, it's not silly at all. It's normal for parents to be scared of their children's deaths and husbands' wives." "I know I'd be." She smiled genuinely after that and hugged me. Eventually we stood up and turned to the 3 men who were standing by the doorway. Molly ran to Arthur and hugged him tightly. Sirius was staring at the spot my dead body laid. Remus had a hand on his shoulder but was looking at me. I could see tears in his eyes, but none were falling. It was the same with Sirius. We all walked downstairs and explained to the others what happened. We all spent the night closely huddled together, not knowing if one of us would be dead by the end of year. Chapter 30. Sirius POV. From the boggart scene. Me, Remus, Harrison and Arthur raced up the stairs when we heard the crying. Harrison was ahead of us, so he got to the door first. He wasted no time opening in and comforting who I knew was Molly. The other two and I all stepped into the room to see what could have upset her so much. We looked over to where Harrison had crouched down to her level to soothe her. "It's fine, Molly, it was just a boggart. Your children are all fine. You can flu Bill and Charlie later if you wish. The others are downstairs. Arthur is fine too, as am I." When Harrison said he was fine too, my eyes darted over the boggart. My breath caught in my throat at the sight of the messy black-haired boy with dead green eyes. He was deathly pale and his chest not rising or falling. He had blood pooling out the side of his head. The boy was Harrison, my godson. The boy that was practically my own son, laying dead on the floor. It was a sight I never wanted to see. My brain didn't even register the fact it was only a boggart and the messy-haired boy was only a foot away from me, breathing and healthy. All I could do was look at the cold and pale corpse in front of me in absolute horror. Eventually I felt someone's warm hand on my shoulder. I still couldn't take my eyes off Harrison. I then felt two arms slide around my waist and hug me tightly. "I'm right here, Uncle Padfoot. I'm fine, I promise," I heard a deep but soft voice say. My head snapped to my left shoulder where Remus' hand once lay, now replaced by a boy's head. Then I realized what he said and that the boy had messy black curls. "Harrison. H. Harrison," my voice cracked as tears pooled in my eyes. He looked up and smiled. "Yeah, I'm fine." I smiled and lunged for him, holding him close against my chest. Eventually we all went downstairs and all sat close together. I didn't once let go of Harrison, even if it was only a hand on his arm. He didn't seem to mind though. Harrison's POV. I woke up the next morning to find myself with a stiff neck and warm body. I realized I was sitting on the sofa in the front room. I looked to my right, where Remus was curled up at the end of the sofa, asleep. On my right was Sirius, whose chest I was laying against, still asleep. Molly and Arthur must have gone upstairs to bed, as they were nowhere to be seen. Fred and George were hugging each other in their sleep on a conjured bed. Hermione and Ginny were on the other sofa curled up at either end. And finally Ron was sleeping contentedly on another conjured bed. I stood up and stretched. I decided to go and shower and get ready for school, which began today. I was sad that I wouldn't be around Padfoot and Moony during the day, but I'd be able to see them every night if I wished, as I could either apparate or shadow walk. It was easier now that Sirius was free. He seemed so much happier this time, so did Remus. Sheep. I got showered and dressed into a tight-fitted black top and ripped black jeans, a white beanie and white trainers. I walked downstairs to find everyone except Ron awake now. I threw a bucket of ice-cold water over him and bolted into the kitchen. Ron was hot on my heels, shouting after me. They were all sitting at the table when I ran in and looked up, not even surprised as they were all used to my antics by now. I ran behind Sirius at the head of the table, as he looked the most intimidating except Molly. Hee. "Harrison." "Yes, I do believe that's me," I piped up cheekily. He growled and tackled me to the floor, play fighting with each other. Sheep. Eventually the adults brought us to King's Cross Station. This time Sirius didn't have to come in dog form and I could actually hug him properly. "By Uncle Padfoot." I mumbled into his neck. He laughed and said, "We will see you soon, pup. Don't worry." I nodded and walked onto the train with the others. I sat with all of them and Neville and Luna. Sheep. Of course it was Umbitch again, the menacing pink toad. I ignored her entire speech and went up to Gryffindor Tower. It was going to be a very, very, very long SS year. Brooke. Chapter 31. Harrison's POV. The year went quite similar to last time with me teaching the DA, which I refused to call Dumbledore's Army because come on. So instead we didn't really give it a name, we just called it a dueling club spell learning club. I taught them much easier with my added strength and floored anyone who said I wasn't that strong. Umbridge still seemed to hate me, but I didn't care. She couldn't call me a liar anymore, but instead called me an attention-seeking brat. In my last life I would have gotten rather upset angry, but it was just amusing to me now. I pranked her mercilessly, turning her entire classroom black and all her clothes to be like Snape's. I turned Snape's to be pink like hers. It was rather entertaining to say the least. I had found more Horcruxes we know had destroyed, the one in my head, the diary, the ring, the locket. Nagini, I didn't want to kill her, so Killian just removed the soul piece. The diadem. We now only had to get the cup out of Bellatrix's vault. I had told Dumbledore to ask the goblins if they could search the vaults, as even goblins find Horcruxes to be horrendous things. I was glad I would never get the fake visions of Ciri being tortured. Arthur never got attacked as he wasn't needed to protect the prophecy. Sheep. Finally, after about 2 months of searching, the goblins found the cup. Dumbledore said he would use Fiendfire to destroy it. That left only the soul piece in Voldemort himself, which I could quite easily destroy now. It was the last week of school, and me, Neville, Luna, Hermione, Ron, Fred and George were all in Hogsmeade. Fred and George decided to stay until the end and do a massive end-of-year prank with me and the others for their send-off. I had given them my Triwizard earnings for their joke shop and wished them luck on it. Like last time, they said I could have anything for free as I helped them start it all. Sheep. I couldn't shake the feeling that something very bad was going to happen. All the deities were being very quiet and were ignoring me when I asked if something was going to happen today. Me and the others were all walking towards the carriages, just leaving the 3 broomsticks. We were all mucking around, making stupid puns, jokes, and talking about pranks. So do you remember Umbridge's face when she saw her robes? Neville laughed. Oh, Merlin, that was hilarious. She looked as if we had murdered a cat in front of her. Ron chuckled. Ah, damn, I complained loudly. What's wrong, Haza? Luna asked. We should have got Minnie to help us, as she is a cat animagus. Imagine all the pranks we could have pulled on Umbridge with her. They all laughed at the mere thought of Minnie pranking Umbridge. We could all imagine it, as Minnie seemed to hate her more than most of us did. I began to think about how amazing this life had been, and when I thought about last year's end-of-year prank, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. They all looked at me as if I was off my rocker at the sudden outburst.
Hatsa Hermione asket.
Sorry, I was just thinking about last year with the teachers doing the waltz. That set them off laughing. I still couldn't get rid of the sinking feeling, so I tried to think about the image of Snape being twirled around by Minnie. It made me smile, but I still couldn't shake the feeling. I was growing increasingly worried as time went on, but ignored it. Hey, I thought of a new prank, I shouted suddenly. They all looked amused at my enthusiasm. And what is it, Haza? Fred asked. We need to prank Dumbledore, of course. They all chalked. Nobody had ever managed to prank him. He just seemed to notice when something was happening. And how are we going to do that? Lemon drops. I said simply, as if it explained everything. They all stared at me with confusion written all over their faces, but amusement in their eyes. Ron said, put a hair fallout potion in them to make his hair and beard fall out. This prank is inspired by another story. Twins. A Different Life. It's a really good story. It's a WBWL book and very entertaining. Harrison James Denvey Potter, we are not making the headmaster's beard fall off, Hermione said, horrified. The others, especially the twins, were doubled over in laughter, holding onto each other for support. Oh, Harrison, that is the best idea I've heard, the twins said in sync. I grinned and continued to walk down the pavement. So you promised to help me with it, huh? I asked them hopefully. They grinned mischievously. I was laughing when suddenly there was pops of apparition all around. People clad in black robes and silver masks around us. Death Eaters. We all pulled our wands out and formed a sort of circle to protect each other's backs. It went me, then on my right was Ron, Luna, Hermione, Neville, George, and then Fred on my left, completing the circle formation. Some had their masks off, proudly showing off their faces. The inner circle members, whilst others were hiding behind silver masks like cowards. Voldemort wasn't around yet, but I knew he'd come soon. And then the chaos began. Sheep. Spells were flying everywhere. Luna, Neville, and Hermione were all knocked out on the floor. Me and Fred were heavily bleeding. George and Ron were exhausted. The order hadn't arrived yet. Finally, after 15 minutes, the order began to apparate in. Hestia and Daedalus taking the 3 stunned teens to the safety of the medical wing and the others staying behind to help. Currently, we were all fighting in either pairs or duos. Me and Ron versus Rudolphus Lestrange and Sebastian Lestrange. Fred and George versus Dolohov and Rookwood. Sirius and Remus versus Bellatrix and Barty Jr. Moody, Kingsley, and Dumbledore versus Lucius, Crabbe Sr. and Goyle Sr. Tonks and Mundungus were fighting off the weak, masked ones rather easily, clearly showing those Death Eaters were not the inner circle. Sheep. Ron was knocked out in an explosion, leaving me to duel the twins on their own. They were both deadly, but Sebastian was much weaker than his twin brother. I managed to outfuel him, leaving me and Rudolphus. I didn't bother to look at how the others were doing as I was so focused on him. I heard Rookwood shout a blasting hex at a wall by Fred that should have killed him, but it didn't as I managed a last-minute shield around him. He still was knocked out, but he was alive. George threw me an appreciative glance and shouted, "Good luck," before operating Fred to the castle. Sheep. Finally Voldemort showed his face, taunting us all. I had long finished off Rudolphus and was helping Tonks and Mundungus with the weaker ones. I went straight for Moldy Shorts, mocking him as well. Finally decided to show up Snakeface, I hollered at him. He sneered and sent a killing curse my way. I sent an Expelliarmus at the same time. It was very similar to the Battle of Hogwarts. Both our spells clashed together and began to fight each other to reach the other person. Eventually, with his Horcruxes all broken, I overpowered him, rebounding his own Avada Kedavra back at him once more, and his body fell to the floor, like a mortal. He didn't disintegrate like in the movies. He fell down on the floor, with a face of pure horror as death laughed in his face, like a mere muggle. The remaining Death Eaters apparated away at the sight of their dead master, all except one that nobody saw. It was silent for a while until Tonks said, "He's dead," and that sent everyone present into cheers. They summoned the other Order members to spread the news. Everything was going great, until it wasn't. Next chapter is the final one before the epilogue. Chapter 32. Harrison's POV. I was just about to hug Sirius, a massive grin on my face when I heard it. I heard those dreaded words, Avada Kedavra, and I knew that that would be the end of me. I saw the look of horror flash across the Order member's face, and then it was darkness. The last thing I ever saw was Sirius and Remus' faces, horror-struck. So I whispered my last words to them with a true smile on my face. Mischief-managed uncles. And I was gone. Holy Merlin, I'm breaking my own heart over here, loudly crying face. Is it just me? Sheep. Sirius POV. I heard the words that took away James and Lily all those years ago, and then saw the sickly green flash that was notorious for ending lives. It was heading straight for my godson, my puppy, my baby Harrison. My face portrayed pure horror, as did Remus. Just before he was hit with the curse, he looked us in the eyes and smiled. Mischief-managed uncles, he said softly, and closed his eyes whilst taking a deep breath that would be his last. Those words broke my heart into a million pieces, and I knew Remus felt the same. How could such a once happy saying for me and the Marauders turn into the words I now hated the most? The last words of my godson, Harrison James Denver Potter. And with those spoken words said, the curse hit him square in the back and he slumped forwards into me. I caught him in my arms, against my chest, and stared wide-eyed at him. I fell to my knees with him and began to shake him, hoping for a reaction. But there was none, as the dead couldn't even sense somebody's presence. I cradled his still warm body close to my chest. I could hear the Order members restraining his murderer, but I didn't care. All I cared about was Remus and the 15-year-old teenager in my arms. They were both my entire world, and if lost half of it. I shakily pressed his 2 fingers to his neck for a pulse, but there was none. He was truly dead. Dead just like his mother and father. Just like my own brother and friends from school. Like Marlene, Mary, Emmeline, and many, many others. I couldn't help it. I cried over the body of M.Y. Harrison, my godson, my son. The sight would have made anyone cry. I felt Remus' arms around me as he had sunk to the floor just behind me. I could feel his own body racking with sobs, silently but still sobbing. Silent sobs are always the most painful. I looked down at the messy-haired boy and got flashbacks of the Boggart in Grimmauld Place. I got flashbacks of the First War. Flashbacks of when I first ever saw that tiny but amazing green-eyed boy. His first words, him first crawling, him riding in my back in my animagus form. Meeting him in the Shrieking Shack. Seeing him arrive in Grimmauld Place months ago. He had left me just like James and Lily had all those years ago. His emerald eyes that were once sparkling with life and mischief now dead and dull. It hurt so much to see life and mischief gone from his eyes. Everyone always said the mischief never seemed to leave his eyes, and it seemed they were wrong. His eyes were now empty, void of any emotion. It was too painful, so I closed my eyes and let the tears slide down my face. Sheep. Harrison's POV. I woke up in Death's office. All the deities were there. So am I dead for real this time? Killian looked up. No, young master, you can still go back if you really wish. Or you can finally go on to the afterlife and live in peace with your mother and father. I closed my eyes and thought about both options. On one side I would be with my mum and dad again, but on the other I'd be leaving Sirius and Remus. One option was selfish while the other was selfless. I made my decision. I, for one of the few times in my life, chose the selfish option. I moved on. I didn't know why, but it just felt as if it was meant to be. I felt like I was supposed to be with them this time, and I couldn't help but want it. It has been my deepest desire since my first life, and I'd finally gotten it. Yes, I did think about all my friends and family, but I realized I managed it without all of them, and so would they. Of course it would be hard, but they'd learn. And I'd see them all one day again. I'm ready to move on, Killian. He nodded. I know. Thank you, all of you, I said truthfully. They all smiled as they were in human form and nodded. You were the best master I've ever had, little one. Killian told me. I was shocked. Really? Oh yes, you never once forced me to do something or tried to get me to bring back the dead like most do. I shook my head. If they die, then it was meant to be. We will all see those who die one day. He nodded in understanding and said goodbye. Bye. And with that, I finally boarded the train on Sheep. I woke up confused as to where I was when it all came crashing back. I had died and moved on to the afterlife. I sat up and looked around. My emerald green eyes met familiar warm hazel ones. They belonged to a very familiar man, with unruly black hair and a youthful face. He was smiling, but his eyes were glistening with tears. Harrison, my son, he said. The man was James Fleamont Potter, my father. The man who tragically lost his life at the mere age of 21 years old. A man who had his entire life ahead of him but sacrificed it for me, his son. Dad. He nodded and held his arms out. I ran as fast as humanly possible and tackled him into a hug, burying my face into his neck, smelling the familiar scent of my father that I hadn't smelt in 14 years. Both our eyes were streaming with tears as father and son were reunited. James Potter. I felt another, smaller hand on my head and turned to find a young woman with fiery red hair and emerald eyes identical to my own. My mother, Lily Marie Potter née Evans. Mom. Yes, my darling, it's Mama. And with that, the dam broke. We spent hours crying together and just holding each other close. So, who actually killed me? They both suddenly looked absolutely furious. Peter. My dad said, practically frothing at the mouth. Oh, when I get my hands on him, my mother said, eyes full of fury. I winced, having heard all about her temper. I was so happy to be reunited with the both of them and they with me. Yes. It was a rather tragic ending, but parents and son were reunited once more, and what could be happier than that? Now, we were all going to watch over their others until it was their time. The end. Epilogue. Next chapter. B. Epilogue. Harrison's POV. Me and my parents watched my funeral sadly. They both got very upset, realizing just how young I was. The funeral. Today we are here to celebrate the life of a brave, kind, caring, mischievous hero. A boy whose life was tragically cut short. A boy who didn't even make it to adulthood. He died at the mere age of 15. But he didn't die in vain. He died defeating the most feared man of all time. His name was Harrison Potter. Dumbledore said to the entire school, staff and order. Practically everyone was crying, even some Slytherins who I had made friends with like Daphne and Blaise who didn't become Death Eaters yet. Some were just staring at the tombstone. A blank face, but you could see the grief in their eyes, like Sirius and Remus. They held strong until everyone left. Then they finally collapsed to their knees with one hand each on either side of the top of the tombstone and the other holding each other's hand. The tombstone read, Harrison James Denver Potter, born July 31st, 1980, died June 18th, 1996, age 15. Brave, loyal and strong fighter right till the very end. It was rather odd and depressing to watch my own funeral, but it was even harder to watch them both cry. Such heart-wrenching cried when you couldn't reach out to them. I placed my hands on both of their shoulders, even though I knew they couldn't feel it. Actually, young master, I want to do one last thing for you. What? I shall give you the ability to comfort them. They will feel your touch but cannot hear or see you. They will, however, be able to smell your scent and your parents. Will my mum and dad be able to touch them? Yes. Okay. And with that, I felt a small shiver go through my body as Killian gave me his final gift and goodbye before disappearing once more. I knelt back down with my parents next to me and sling an arm over Sirius' shoulder. He wouldn't be able to feel it completely, but he would be able to feel pressure on his shoulders, and if he sniffed the air, he'd get a hit of my scent. Sirius POV. As I was sitting beside the grave, tears spilling down my cheeks, I suddenly felt pressure around my shoulders and a familiar scent hit the air. It smelt like pine cones and broom polish. Harrison's scent. And with that, I knew he was there. I put one arm on top of my shoulder where I knew his hand lay. Suddenly, I registered two more very familiar scents: broom polish and treacle tart. James' scent. And rose perfume and lavender. Lily's scent. They were all there with me. I took comfort in that, but still missed them dearly. Sheep. Harrison's POV. It took many years, but eventually they all passed on. Molly came first, dying from natural causes. She wasn't very old, but still died in her sleep, peacefully. It was a very emotional moment when she saw us three. Then came Arthur, then Frank, Alice, Dumbledore. Eventually, though, one day, I saw a face I hadn't seen for so long. It was Sirius' face. He died young for a wizard after being murdered in a duel at 46. When he caught sight of us three, all of us rushed together and had a very tearful but happy reunion. And then Remus came at the age of 55. He died in an explosion along with Charlie and Percy. They were the first of the Weasley kids I'd seen in years. And finally the rest came. Through the years I attended all their weddings, even if they couldn't see me. Ron and Hermione named their firstborn after me, Harrison Weasley. I was so happy when he was born. He had red hair and brown eyes. Finally, we were all reunited once again. End of story. Thank you all so much for reading. I know it was a very unexpected ending, but it JUSR fits so well. I am still currently writing my third book, Too Far Gone, and when that's over I will start a new book, so go and read it. B.